This video has been rated T for Tomb. In 1996, a teal-top-wearing, dual-pistol shooting, tomb-raiding badass adventurer made her entrance and took the world by storm. Tomb Raider made a huge impact with its groundbreaking gameplay and inspirational heroine Lara Croft. The game went on to spawn a series of sequels, evolving into one of the most successful 90s gaming franchises. I think the key to the Tomb Raider series' greatness, well, besides Lara of course, is the levels we got to explore in the games. These levels showcase some of the best 3D level design of all time, made by a team of incredibly talented people. The great variety in styles, challenges and locales they presented made them the essential foundation the Tomb Raider series needed to achieve greatness. The first game revolutionized 3D level design by having the player interact with large, fully explorable 3D environments. The second game featured more linear level design with a bigger emphasis on combat and vehicular gameplay. The third game expanded on non-linear level design by giving the player more options of exploration. The fourth game introduced interconnected level systems with smaller individual levels and a bigger emphasis on backtracking. And the fifth game went back to basics with its level design but had an increased focus on cinematic storytelling. I want to rank all the levels of the classic Tomb Raider games. I count 120 levels across the 5 main games, the PC exclusive expansions, as well as a few special ones. The levels will be ranked according to my overall impression of them based on level design, gameplay, narrative, atmosphere, and visual presentation. Ranking all these levels will not be easy and I'm bound to make some tough choices. I feel like I should warn you that since this is a ranking from worst to best, I will obviously be very negative and critical in the beginning of the ranking, but trust me, I have nothing but love for these games and that will become obvious once I get to the levels I like. I promise. Also, I'll undoubtedly give a level you like a low ranking and a level you dislike a high ranking. It's unavoidable since we all have different opinions. Just keep in mind that this ranking is just my opinion and I don't intend to state it as fact. The purpose of this video is to entertain you and take you on a ride back to the past. From caves to Red Alert and every level in between. So sit back, relax and enjoy, because it's time for me to rank every single level from the classic 5 Tomb Raider games. Whew, here we go. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm cheating with this ranking as this tech demo from 1995 obviously doesn't qualify as a Tomb Raider level. I have decided to include it anyways because of how fascinating it is to look back on. This is what our beloved Tomb Raider series evolved from after all. Also, a top 119 is just annoying. By including this, at least it's a top 120. Again, the level is just a tech demo that's unfinished and barely functional, so of course it has to be last. Now, let's move on to a level that has no excuses. It's time to reveal the level that I actually do think is the worst Tomb Raider level of all time. Core design's fatigue with the Tomb Raider games is so obvious in Tomb Raider Chronicles at times, and so is their desperation to make anything but Tomb Raider games. Old Mill is the epitome of this fatigue. This is a Tomb Raider level that desperately wants not to be a Tomb Raider level. The Ireland section of Chronicles has excellent atmosphere and sound design, but we are so far removed from what Tomb Raider is all about here that it doesn't even feel like Tomb Raider. The level is boring and confusing, and it has absolutely no standout moments outside of the intrusive long cutscenes that consistently ruin the level's pacing. All of the level's important moments are taken care of in these cutscenes, which have this bizarre, goofy tone to them that feels so out of place. The level's only noteworthy moment of gameplay is the sea hack puzzle, but that is the perhaps most unintuitive and frustrating puzzle in the series. While aimlessly running around in this insipid location, my mind kept drifting to classic levels from the first Tomb Raider games and I just kept wondering, how could core design get Tomb Raider so wrong? Old Mill is terrible. There is no doubt in my mind that this is the worst Tomb Raider level of all time. The age-old question whether the worst entry in a series is one that's shockingly bad or one that's so boring you don't know what to say about it also applies here. Old Mill is the former and Trenches is the latter. I prefer boring-ass Trenches over the mind-numbingly stupid Old Mill, but Trenches has nothing to be proud of in this minor victory. Even Old Mill has a more interesting setting and atmosphere than Trenches does. Trenches doesn't really do anything wrong in terms of gameplay, it's just so damn dull. The standout moments of the level revolves around outsmarting a turret and a mounted flamethrower, but these are hardly exciting and fun to figure out. Add a drab and depressing setting to the boring gameplay and we've got ourselves a real stinker. Street Bazaar and the other levels of the Last Revelation's Cairo section share a common problem. They don't really stand out from one another. Another problem is their dark and depressing Warzone setting, which just doesn't evoke the same sense of adventure that you get from other Tomb Raider settings. I understand that this setting is important to the story, but it just doesn't work for me. Add this to the general confusion of navigating these interconnected levels and the fact that barely any of them feel self-contained. Street Bazaar has a few minor standout moments that at least makes it an improvement on Trenches, but it's not exactly an all-time great Tomb Raider adventure. The base is probably the most basic Tomb Raider level out there. There's just absolutely nothing going on here. Lara simply explores an industrial setting, which has been done way better in previous Tomb Raider games with no exciting platforming or puzzle solving whatsoever. The base really feels like a bare minimum effort to pad out Chronicles. The level's only potential standout moment is the claw on the ceiling of the warehouse that will constantly try to slam down on Lara if she stands beneath it. This claw is being controlled by some bastard that you just can't wait to get your hands on, but you know what? It's taken care of in a cutscene instead of having the player do it like so many other things in Chronicles. I guess the real highlight of this snooze fest is when Lara kicks the ass of some Duke Nukem lookalike at the end of the level. But that's also just a cutscene. By Labyrinth, the second level in Tomb Raider Chronicles Ireland section, I'm already kind of fed up with the aesthetics and atmosphere of this section. I think the problem is that it's the sort of setting that makes a huge impression on you when you first experience it, but the novelty quickly wears off, especially when the gameplay doesn't add any depth to it. Labyrinth even has the added downside of featuring far more boring locations than the other two levels in this section. At least the level succeeds in creating a creepy atmosphere at times, unlike the farcical Old Mill level. The church is a memorable location, but unfortunately it doesn't facilitate any memorable gameplay. The chase at the end of the level is pretty cool too, but the rest of the level is padded with uninteresting gameplay, including a switch puzzle that's so easy that I don't even know if it truly qualifies as one. Hall of Demetrius barely qualifies as a level as it only has a minute or so of actual gameplay. It's really just the setting of a pretty cool cutscene that the player then gets to kill some baddies in and explore a bit. But there's really nothing to explore here. Well, except for Foncroy's hidden escape route that can be found by observing scratch marks on the floor. I don't understand why this level wasn't just the final area of the previous level instead of being its own level. This is a general criticism I have of The Last Revelation, but it's obviously really bad in the case of Hall of Demetrius. It's a beautifully decorated area, but what else can I really say? Sphinx Complex is a level in which Lara builds a shovel so she can dig herself under the Great Sphinx of Giza, and that's pretty much it. Sure, there are some of Foncroy's men to kill as well, and a secret inside a nearby storage facility, and some dangerously deep pits to cross as well, but that's it. It does have a striking visual presentation, however, with the blood-red thunderous sky working as a stunning backdrop to the towering Great Sphinx that looms over Lara. Still, when all is said and done, this is a level in which Lara builds a shovel and digs a hole, and that's pretty much it. Khufu's Queen's Pyramids is notable for featuring a secret that requires a highly missable key from a previous level, making this one of the more elusive secrets in the series. And the only level transcending secret ever, if I'm not mistaken. My biggest problem with this level is that fatigue from the rather repetitive Giza section has set in hard at this point. The Giza levels just really flow together and don't stand out much on their own, and Khufu's Queen's Pyramids in particular feels tired. The level does have a rather difficult maze, however, which at least gives the player something else to do than just jumping across deep pits for the 7th time. Inside the Great Pyramid is the Last Revelation's penultimate level. The classic Tomb Raider games have some absolutely epic penultimate levels that put us through hell to prepare us for the final boss at the end of the game. This level is, not one of those. Inside the Great Pyramid is a really lackluster lead-in to the final confrontation against Set in the Last Revelation. The level design and gameplay of the level is just as unimaginative as the title of the level. Objectively speaking, it's not really terrible, it's just utterly disappointing. Chambers of Tulun tasks the player with the rather unique objective of trapping a minotaur inside a mosque. This requires a surprising amount of planning, as the player also needs to think ahead and plan an escape route. The Minotaur puzzle dominates this level, but there's also a puzzle in a warehouse later on where Lara must set off some sprinklers by using a torch and stuff. But that doesn't exactly feel like a level-defining moment. The worst thing about this level is the looping music, which plays throughout the entire Minotaur puzzle. This relatively short track is being repeated over and over and over again, which made me absolutely sick of it while fumbling my way through the puzzle. This track is actually a cut track from Tomb Raider 3 that should have been featured during the final boss battle of that game, but I'm kind of glad it was cut because I think I hate it. And I don't care much for this level either. Inside Minkori's Pyramid is another run-of-the-mill level that's set, you guessed it, inside a pyramid. There's a little more going on here, with a couple of spike pits and traps that must be passed safely, so it requires a more careful approach compared to the level inside the Great Pyramid. When it all comes down to it, however, it's just another variation of the same old formula of the game's repetitive Giza section. It's not just Lara that's having a nightmare here. Okay, it's really not that bad, but it really does come across as something a level designer made while screwing around. It's obvious that the level isn't meant to be taken seriously, and I see what it's trying to do, but I just don't think this kind of kitchen sink level design fits Tomb Raider. To me, the level comes across as something someone made in a level editor, as opposed to a level that was designed by a seasoned Tomb Raider level designer. I kind of love that Lara's butler Winston has joined her on this adventure though. As always, his purpose in life is to serve Lara tea, and no Italian mobster, giant birdman, or a friggin' T-Rex is going to stop him. Winston follows Lara everywhere to serve her tea, and I mean everywhere. Jeez, Winston. Also, why does Lara have a direct satellite feed to Winston's hotel bathroom? Like, what the fuck, Lara? Nightmare in Vegas has some amusing moments, but the level is too random and insane for my taste. Despite all the wacky stuff in the level, it's surprisingly boring from a gameplay standpoint, and aesthetically it might be the ugliest level in the series. It's all just meant to be a bad dream though, so I guess it's forgivable. Deep Sea Dive might be my biggest disappointment of any Tomb Raider game. Since the constant threat of drowning is out of the equation, there are infinite possibilities for underwater exploration, but it's completely wasted. Deep Sea Dive barely has 3 minutes of gameplay. Just imagine if Deep Sea Dive had been a full-blown 20-minute Tomb Raider adventure. We could have been exploring underwater caves and shipwrecks and stuff without ever having to worry about any underwater breath meter. But I'm just dreaming at this point. Like Hall of Demetrius or, well, Deep Sea Dive, Alexandria is really short and barely qualifies as a level. The primary function of it is to introduce the player to a brand new hub-like area near the coast of Alexandria. Here, Lara's close friend Shawneve serves as a hint giver in case the player gets lost, which is very likely to happen. Since Lara's butler Winston is nowhere to be found in the Last Revelation, at least we have Shawneve to annoy instead. The reason why this tiny level ranks this relatively high on the list is due to the fact that I really like this area. The little plaza with the fountain in front of Shawneve's study is really beautiful and it has a nice atmosphere. This was also where I first discovered that Lara can now shimmy across corners, which is how the level's secret must be unlocked. Some opening levels of classic Tomb Raider games are among the best levels of their respective game and highly memorable due to them being the player's first impression of that game. But if there's one thing Streets of Rome is not, it's memorable. It doesn't work well as an opening level of Tomb Raider Chronicles as nothing in the level stands out besides the highly entertaining presence of the returning Larsen and Pierre. Compared to their portrayal in the first game, they've been seriously dumbed down here, which technically makes Larsen borderline brain dead considering how stupid he already was. Larsen also does Pierre-like ambushes, which feels like a nice throwback to the first game. Anyways, this level is exclusively enjoyable because of Larsen and Pierre, because gameplay-wise, there's just nothing going on here. The level designer has done a relatively good job with their interpretation of Rome. Exploring the various little streets and plazas and stuff in this sleepy part of the city is fine, but I'm just really missing an interesting platforming section or a puzzle or something. Anything. Since Lara's home is nowhere to be found in Chronicles, the game's tutorial is set within a warehouse, which is a nice enough idea, but I think we all would have preferred Croft Manor to this. All Hallows is a secret bonus level in Tomb Raider 3 that's awarded to the player for finding all of the game's 60 secrets. Considering how hard you need to work to unlock this level, it's disappointing how little it has to offer though. While it has a rather memorable setting inside a cathedral with a unique atmosphere, the cathedral feels abstract and nonsensical in its architecture. And from a gameplay standpoint, this level is entirely forgettable. Essentially, you are just pulling switches around the cathedral with a few traps here and there, including a devious zipline that will take Lara straight to her grave. The level is basically unfinished, which explains why it feels underdeveloped in certain areas, like this random jump scare. It was originally designed to be the second level of the London section in between Thames Wharf and Aldwych, but it was cut due to time constraints. This is really a shame, as I think the London section suffers without it due to how perfectly it would have bridged those two levels had it been finished. Towards the end of the level, Lara swims through sewers with floating dead bodies from Sophia Lee's experiments. This is genuinely creepy and would have perfectly set up the London section's later narrative development had it been part of the main game. Oh well. Gallows Tree is the best level of the Ireland section of Tomb Raider Chronicles, but it has some of the same issues as the other ones. A lot of it can be excused by the fact that it's a teenage Lara adventure, so it's perhaps okay that it doesn't quite feel like Tomb Raider. In these levels, Lara goes toe-to-toe with various creatures from Irish folklore, which is charming, sure. But it's also the section's greatest detriment, as it all feels a bit too over the top and silly at points. The problem is that when neither Lara nor the level plays like Tomb Raider, it's only really Tomb Raider in name. Gallows Tree isn't a great level, but it has phenomenal sound design and atmosphere. Chronicles is guilty of many things, but its sound design is honestly one of the series' best, and the Ireland section is perhaps its best showcase of this. There is only so much great sound design can do to improve a bad level though, or a mediocre one in the case of Gallows Tree, I guess. Minkora's Pyramid is one of many similar feeling levels in the Last Revelation's Giza section at the end of the game, but this level stands out positively to me for a couple of reasons. First of all, it has a unique moment in which the player can influence the outcome of a fight between a giant scorpion and a soldier. Succeeding in saving the soldier rewards Lara with an armory key, which can be used to obtain a very generous secret in a much later level. Second of all, this level has one of the best platforming sections in the game, as Lara must climb the pyramid by carefully planning a series of jumps. To do this successfully requires some planning, as the road ahead isn't straightforward at all. Sometimes Lara must descend the pyramid before she can ascend it again. All in all, Minkora's Pyramid is a relatively enjoyable level. The Great Pyramid is very similar to Minkora's Pyramid, but on hard mode. Here Lara must climb an even bigger pyramid with a far more complex platforming sequence, and with giant stone blocks rolling down the side of the pyramid as well for good measure. Sometimes it can be really tricky to figure out where to go, which is surprisingly stimulating. Crossing the Great Pyramid actually feels more like solving a puzzle than platforming, even though that's exactly what you do. This makes for one of the most immersive challenges in the game. The downside is that this is all there is to the level, but I'm okay with that. The deck always feels like a chore to play through, and it's always a level that I don't look forward to when I play Tomb Raider 2. Let me get the positives out of the way first. The concept of a shipwreck being stuck in an underground cave is so cool, and it gives us one of the most epic visuals of the series. And that's pretty much it for the positives. I just don't really like this one. In general, Tomb Raider 2 is a more linear experience than the other Tomb Raider games, but this level is an exception, unsuccessfully I might add. The deck feels like a giant void where the level design doesn't dictate any sort of objective or goal to the player. Instead, the player is just left wandering aimlessly around this massive confusing cave, potentially for hours. On top of that, the level doesn't look very good. It has a very uniform appearance from start to finish with little to no variation whatsoever. That would probably be okay if I didn't spend so much time in the level every time I played it, or if it was a typical attractive Tomb Raider location. You know what? At this point, I think it's only reasonable to rename this level the Dick. I'm out of here. Angkor Wat is one of the most interesting places on our planet and easily one of the most obvious stages for a Tomb Raider level to take place at. Unfortunately, this setting feels a little wasted here on this disappointing and frustrating level. It's the Last Revelation's tutorial level, which first of all means that Croft Manor is no more, which makes me sad. Here the player takes control of a 16-year-old Lara Croft while being introduced to the game's mechanics by her mentor Werner von Croy.
Use forward and left and right to move across the surface until you reach the shore. Then press action to climb out.
Seriously, who talks like that? The dialogue between these two is pretty hilarious, with von Croy's bizarre way of speaking and Lara's at times bratty attitude.
The old gout playing up again, Werner?
Dear Lara, you are a valuable asset to the quest.
Ew! Apropos pig, watching von Croy trying to hunt the wild pigs in the area is quite a sight to behold. Anyways, this level is a pain in the ass. If you are well versed in Tomb Raider, like I imagine a lot of players were when they began playing The Last Revelation, it is the 4th game in the series after all, the constant interruptions from von Croy are incredibly annoying. Tutorials are no longer just delivered through speech, but in cutscenes that constantly break up the gameplay. Even simple stuff, such as fucking jumps and grabbing ledges, are being explained in these intrusive cutscenes. Just look at this!
Patience, child. Disrespect is a route to carelessness. Our route lays beyond the stream. This gap is wider.
Hey! Listen! Listen! Listen!
Overall, Angkor Wat feels wasted on this level. It's not entirely bad though, and I do have some level of fondness for it. The surroundings are obviously interesting, finding Lara's backpack is a pretty cute moment, and Indiana Jones makes a cameo. He's dead, but still. Ultimately, the level leaves me disappointed more than anything, and it feels like a big fat wasted opportunity. Valley of the Kings is one of very few vehicle levels in the Last Revelation. The level opens with a dramatic shootout, however, between Lara and Van Croy's desert ninjas. Following this, the remainder of the level is spent chasing after Lara's former guide Ahmed Ben Trayal, who betrayed Lara just before the level began. The scenery is stunning, but the chase feels rather awkward due to the clunky Jeep controls. They feel slippery and a little unpolished, so the Jeep isn't that fun to drive. The highlight of the level is the soundtrack, which feels like a throwback to Tomb Raider 2's epic snowmobile theme. Valley of the Kings is so short that it's over before it really gets started, as it transitions directly into KV5 is slightly better than its predecessor. The level improves on Valley of the Kings by having a couple of areas that feel enticing to explore outside of the Jeep. There's even a tiny section where you need to go out of the Jeep and climb some scaffolds in order to progress, which helps diversifying the gameplay a little bit. The level also has some secrets that are quite a way off the beaten path. Still, both Valley of the Kings and KV5 feel rather pointless and underwhelming. You can just blast through both of these levels in a matter of minutes, and I doubt you spend even half the time inside the Jeep that you do in vehicles from previous games in the series. Again, I don't really understand why these two levels weren't just one. I think it would have been better that way, but let's be honest, only marginally so. A dark and depressing war zone isn't exactly what I associate with a fun Tomb Raider adventure, but City of the Dead does a decent job of making something out of this miserable setting. Here, Lara finds herself in the crosshairs of soldiers and turrets as opposed to the fantastical skeletons and mummies of the previous levels. This adds a layer of realism I'm not the biggest fan of. The fact that one of the puzzles of the level involves a dead body kind of speaks volumes about the drab feeling of this level. The dead body puzzle might be one of the stupidest puzzles ever, as well as it's built around the fact that Lara only can enter a crawl space from a hanging position and therefore needs to open a trapdoor. While this may seem like a clever way of handling a gameplay limitation, it breaks the immersion completely because of how unbelievable it is that Lara can't enter a crawl space from a standing position. This means that the level designer mistakenly has highlighted a flaw in the game design as opposed to hiding it. The level must primarily be navigated by using Shawnee's motorcycle, which has some of the poorest vehicle controls of the series. I get that the sidecar is there for a reason, but it makes the motorcycle so much more awkward to drive. Despite all this criticism, City of the Dead is kind of fun to figure out due to how unusual it is compared to any previous level in the series. It is by no means flawless in execution, but it's a decent level if you're able to get past its initial uninviting and ugly presentation. Pharaoh's Temple of Isis makes an incredible first impression, as the massive entrance to this ancient underwater temple is breathtaking. The game's only 2 hammerhead sharks reside here, and you gotta wonder why they don't appear anywhere else in the game now that Core Design did make their models. Unfortunately, this level cannot live up to the first impression. Lara's objective here is to build a mechanical beetle that is crucial for the next level. This means that Pharaoh's Temple of Isis is nothing more than a transitional area standing in the shadow of its far more noteworthy successor. I guess it's no secret by now that I'm not a huge fan of the Last Revelation's Cairo levels, but Citadel Gate does a few things I really like. I love the apocalyptic atmosphere here. It really does feel like Doomsday is approaching with that terrifying night sky, the scary creatures of the night and locust swarms that appear everywhere. The level designer has done an excellent job of creating a genuinely creepy setting where the deserted streets with closed down shops gives it all a very uneasy vibe. There is some gorgeous moody lighting in this creepy part of Cairo, which does wonders to the atmosphere of the level. Gameplay wise, it's not that much different from any of the other similar feeling levels in this section, but it does throw in a little puzzle and some exciting platforming across the rooftops, which I like. Playable tutorial level is not exactly a sexy title, but it's a surprisingly attractive and fun little level to play through. The level is unique to the Tomb Raider level editor, which makes this one of the more obscure Tomb Raider levels of all time as well. I didn't even know it existed. The level works as a perfect distillation of the Last Revelation's portrayal of ancient Egypt, which is just such a joy to explore. I especially like a secret area in the level, which sees Lara being ambushed by a gang of scorpions on her way to grab the level's revolver pickup. It's by no means a complicated level, and the level design feels rather one-dimensional, but for what this is, a tutorial level, it's surprisingly good and enjoyable, and I found myself intrigued from start to finish. Hidden beneath the coastal ruins of Alexandria are the catacombs in which Lara must collect 4 tridents. These tridents are guarded by undead skeleton warriors who can only be killed with explosives. Or if they mistime their jumps, which happens surprisingly often. The catacombs introduce wraith enemies which will stalk and slowly kill Lara throughout the entire level if not dealt with. These ghosts can only be killed by standing close to certain statues that will disintegrate them upon contact. Catacombs is a fine level, but it's hurt by the fact that it's only half an adventure. Collecting the tridents is fun, but you expect it to go somewhere, which it doesn't because placing them is handled in the next level. And I can't avoid the elephant in the room any longer. The elephant, of course, is ropes. I swear the double rope jump near the beginning of this level can go fucking do one. How could core design expect us to jump between 2 ropes in midair when it's hard enough to handle 1 fucking rope? This challenge has pissed me off more than anything in all of my years as a Tomb Raider fan, but this time I did it first try. Which makes my planned tirade against it a bit awkward. So, yeah. Temple of Poseidon is the direct follow-up to Catacombs, and it's a bit surprising how there's next to no underwater gameplay in the level considering it's the temple of the Greek god of the sea. The temple is absolutely gorgeous, and it's a joy to simply walk around and just take in the ancient beauty of this place. Gameplay-wise, it's a throwback to an old-school type of Tomb Raider level that we don't see much in the Last Revelation, where Lara must collect a number of special items which then must be used in specific locations. This time, Lara must place tridents on 4 Poseidon statues scattered around the temple.
Oh yeah.
Placing all of the tridents will flood the pit in the center of the temple, which makes it possible for Lara to swim to the lost library. This is a very simple premise, but I always enjoy this type of level due to its clear objective. Unfortunately, the search for the tridents and collecting them is all done in the previous level, which means that Temple of Poseidon pretty much only consists of placing them on the statues. I wish that this level in Catacombs had been 1 level instead, which would have made it all feel less basic and unfulfilling. The best thing about Citadel is that it's the end of the Last Revelation's Cairo section. But besides that rather backhanded compliment, this is actually a decent enough level. When I played The Last Revelation as a kid, I always lost interest in the game when I reached Cairo. I always found the levels confusing and irritating, and the setting did not engage me. After hours of confusing interconnected levels, clunky vehicle gameplay and frustrating puzzles, it's nice then to simply have a good old traditional style Tomb Raider level. Which is exactly what Citadel is. The level consists entirely of gameplay elements seen numerous times before in the series, but this is exactly what I need at this point in the game. The undead Templars beneath the Citadel and the disturbing confrontation with Von Croy serve as a satisfying goodbye to the Cairo section. The 13th floor is the opening level of the last ever classic Tomb Raider section before core design moved on to the next generation of Tomb Raider with the Angel of Darkness. When playing this level, it's painfully obvious how much the series has evolved since those caves in Peru, and not necessarily in a good way. The 13th floor is fine, but it's barely recognizable as Tomb Raider at this point. Instead, this feels like core design trying their hand at a Metal Gear Solid or James Bond type video game with the abundance of cinematics, gadgets, and new stealth mechanics. This level really shows that core design wanted a new challenge and were getting tired of designing traditional Tomb Raider gameplay. The 13th floor is decent enough actually, it's only when I remind myself to review this as a Tomb Raider level that I have quite a few problems with it. Since Lara is infiltrating the highly secured VCI headquarters, she now has this hacker guy called Sip in her ears to help her. But Sip sucks! It's not just that he's a really lame and cliched character, but more how Tomb Raider always has been about solitary exploration and Lara's independence, which is lost a bit here. I understand why core design did this, as it makes sense for this setting, but it's another example of how desperately they wanted to make other games than Tomb Raider. The finale of Tomb Raider 2 is a memorable one, with Lara finally taking on Marco Bartoli. But there's a twist. He's a giant dragon now, as a consequence of having pierced his own heart with the dagger of Xi'an. His fiery breath must be avoided at all costs, but besides that, the battle is rather straightforward. Marco the Italian dragon will collapse after having taken a certain amount of damage, and at that point it's crucial to reach the dagger in time to pull it out of his chest before he will rise again. Once Marco has been defeated, the lair will start collapsing, which is actually my favorite moment of the level. At this point in the series, it seemed as if a collapsing final level was to be a tradition equal to Resident Evil's tendency to always have a lab blow up at the end of their games. There's not much to the dragon's lair besides the epic battle against the dragon, so it's difficult to justify it placing higher than this, even though the level does what it does perfectly. It truly is a satisfying finale to Tomb Raider 2, except of course it's not the true finale, but more on that later. The resting place of the mysterious meteorite of Tomb Raider 3 serves as an excellent setting for the final boss battle against Dr. Willard, but dear God, look at him! I can't believe he went through all that trouble to get to look like that. The dated graphics actually add to his disturbing nightmarish appearance, which I guess qualifies as a happy accident. It's kind of sad yet fascinating how Dr. Willard's obsession with hyper-evolution ends like this for him, as I don't think he intended to become a grotesque freak like this. The boss fight itself is pretty complicated, as Lara needs to collect the 4 artifacts again before she can kill Dr. Willard. It's crucial to stun him first though, or he will instantly kill Lara. The ascent out of the cavern is a personal highlight for me, with a very nice overview of the cavern itself, as well as the beautiful snow falling through the opening. Out in the snow, the player is given the opportunity to use their remaining ammo on the last few enemies before the game ends, which is awesome of course. It's difficult for these short levels to size up against the typical Tomb Raider levels, but Meteorite Cavern actually does a decent job of it. Guardian of Semirkit sort of functions as a boss level, as Lara will go toe-to-toe against the titular Guardian, a Raging Bull. This is not a traditional boss fight however, as Lara can't kill the bull. Instead, she must take advantage of the bull's charging attacks to break through doors and pressure plates in the walls in order to escape the area. These encounters are incredibly tense, and I love the unique way of progression here, as it's unlike anything else we've seen in Tomb Raider at this point in the series. Like so many other levels in this game though, the level is too short to amount to anything truly great, but the level is undeniably fun and memorable. Also, you feel like a total badass every time you manage to perfectly roll through the level's terrifying circular blade traps. Trajan's Markets is not a very memorable level, but it stands out to me for featuring some of the series' best sound design. The sound of distant church bells ringing and the occasional dog barking perfectly encapsulates that early morning in a southern European city vibe, which gives the level a great atmosphere. Exploring the Roman baths is interesting, and they look great as well, with the steam being a nice visual effect. What I don't like, however, are the silly bosses in the level, which are simply too over the top for my liking. Halfway through the level, Lara goes toe-to-toe with a weird floating Roman gladiator head on a mechanical octopus body. Yeah, it's dumb, and it's a super frustrating boss fight as well due to the precision the game demands of you to shoot its eyes. Later on, Lara will take on Larson, which feels almost nostalgic at this point, but this fight is followed by another goofy boss fight against some gargoyle heads that are painfully easy to defeat. So basically, this level does really well with its atmosphere and some of its locations, but gets goofy and stupid towards the end. The Tomb Raider games surprisingly often venture into horror-like scenarios, and RX Tech Mines is a truly scary example of this. In this level, Lara explores the dark mines deep beneath the snowy surface of Antarctica, and this place is crawling with disgusting mutants and has a very disturbing atmosphere. The absolute worst part is when Lara drops into a near pitch dark room that has an incredibly unsettling presence. The biggest, scariest, and most dangerous mutants roam this darkness, and it's nerve-wracking. So RX Tech Mines definitely has something going for it in terms of atmosphere, but gameplay-wise this is a very frustrating and difficult level. The main attraction of the level is the minecarts, and they will, more often than not, lead you to frustrating deaths. The minecart rides are fun on paper, but I don't really like them, and since they dominate the level so much, they heavily influence my perception of it. The level actually gets better once the minecart bullshit is over, as it presents the player with an incredibly difficult yet exciting challenge. Here, Lara must swim through the ice-cold waters of the mine's underground lakes to reach the entrance of the lost city of Tinnos, which isn't as easy as it sounds, as Lara will constantly be on the brink of dying from hypothermia. This plays like solving a puzzle, where the player must plan their approach carefully and use the lamps in the water for guidance. This is terrific challenge design, and when Lara finally emerges at the other end of the lake, you feel like you've really accomplished something. Common traits of the classic Tomb Raider expansion levels are their creative themes, next level secrets, and innovative level designs. Like the Cold War, which opens by simply dropping Lara from the sky straight into the Bering Sea. Besides that though, the Cold War is surprisingly middle of the road for an expansion level, but I do appreciate the Northern Lights backdrop. Following a slow start, Lara eventually makes her way to an abandoned Soviet military base where lots of enemies begin appearing. The snowmobile from the Tibet section of Tomb Raider 2 returns here, but this level is pretty bad for driving it. The vehicle creates more problems than solutions for the player due to the level design not really facilitating vehicular gameplay. It's also much easier to deal with enemies when not driving the snowmobile, but constantly getting on and off the vehicle becomes rather annoying. The Cold War shines with its incredible secret as Lara discovers some sort of magical ice temple beneath the ground. The temple is guarded by mysterious invisible warriors who are friendly as long as Lara doesn't attack them. Of course she steals their gold, but at least she helps them take out the thugs that tailed her to the temple as well. Besides this secret though, which is classic expansion level brilliance, the Cold War is quite unremarkable. Offshore Rig opens with Lara waking up in a prison cell without any of her weapons. Besides the Last Revelation, all the classic Tomb Raider games have a level with this premise. Unfortunately, Tomb Raider 2 does not get this type of level right at all. First of all, why is the switch to open the prison cell within the actual prison cell? This is a woman who can pull solid rock blocks, so it's not like these crates would ever stop her from reaching that switch. Anyways, Lara escapes and she has no weapons, so you'd think this would require a more careful approach to the level since she can't defend herself, right? Well, she gets her pistols back literally within a couple of minutes or so what's the point? Lara gets her guns back so soon that the setup and payoff just doesn't work. This is a no weapons level that's not designed like a no weapons level, and that's problematic. These types of levels are actually personal highlights for me in the other games because of how differently they must be played, but Offshore Rig just doesn't work in this regard. The level definitely suffers from this, but besides that, it's really just an average level that's not really bad. A rig isn't the most engaging environment, but it was interesting to see Lara in this type of setting back when Tomb Raider 2 released. Red Alert is preceded by its infamous reputation as this is one of the buggiest Tomb Raider levels ever made. I have run into a few game-breaking bugs myself in this level, but I've learned from my past mistakes and have now mastered the art of safe scumming to get me safely through it. I don't know why this level is such a mess, but I think core design might have been a bit too ambitious with their game design here. It really seems like core design wanted the VCI headquarters levels of Chronicles to be their magnus opum of that game, as this seemingly was the section in which they put all of their heart and soul. Red Alert feels a bit overambitious though, and I can't help but feel that Lara's encounters with cyborgs and whatnot perhaps have taken the Tomb Raider series too far from its roots. I do kind of like those cyborg encounters though, as Lara must rely on her wits instead of her guns to defeat them. It's not a terrible level, but it's obviously hurt by the constant fear of game-breaking bugs and the rather convoluted gameplay.
Yeah, girl, you done good! Now get your bony ass out of there! And hey, you stay in touch, yeah?
Lost City of Tinnos has the right idea by putting Lara back in an ancient place after a series of modern locations, but it's a level that wants to do too much without fully delivering on anything. While I like the concept of elemental trials based on fire, earth, air, and water, I think they are rather flawed in execution. The water trial is ridiculously difficult, while the earth trial feels clumsy due to the awkward physics of the collapsing ceiling, and walking through mud just sucks. The air trial is a maze where the player must observe the wind in Lara's hair to find their way through it, which is rather ingenious and certainly a much better trial. My favorite is the fire trial, where Lara must use a flare to reveal a hidden map which will show which pillars are safe to use to cross a pool of lava. The good elemental trials are just a tiny part of an enormous level that's mainly frustrating and dull though. Lost City of Tinnos means well, but it has a fatal flaw that dooms it to its low placing in this ranking. Wasps. These infinitely spawning green motherfuckers will ruin your life, working hard to make your time in this level as miserable as goddamn possible. If you happen to step on a specific floor tile that will trigger them to begin spawning in one specific room towards the end of the level, good fucking luck. Oh, this room is difficult enough without these flying pieces of shit, so take a guess how much worse it is when they constantly push you off platforms. Lost City of Tinnos looks great atmosphere, but I just don't like playing it. Done. The Mastabas is the black sheep of the Last Revelation's Giza section, as it breaks away from the established pattern of that section. Instead, it establishes its own self-contained pattern of repetition that works surprisingly well at first, but does grow a bit stale towards the end. Throughout the entire level, Lara moves between numerous mastaba via underground tunnels which contain different sorts of puzzles. The puzzles are really what makes this level shine, as it's honestly some of the best in the series. There's one where Lara needs to use the right element on the correct scale in order to progress. Finding sand and water for 2 out of the 3 scales is easy enough, but the scale in the middle requires fire, which is a bit trickier. Lara first needs to steal a jerry can from a nearby gas station in order to fill the scale with gas so she can light it on fire with a torch. Another fun puzzle in the level is themed around the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil monkeys. A different monkey will spawn depending on what level Lara uses. And as always with monkeys in Tomb Raider, you can't be sure what kind of monkey you'll get. Lara of course needs the one that will open the exit for her. I appreciate the Mastabas for breaking the monotony of the Giza section for a while, but besides the fun puzzles, it does get a bit monotonous itself. Underneath the Sphinx is easily one of the better levels towards the end of the Last Revelation. The level tasks the player with collecting 4 different stones in 4 different areas of the level. I love that the level is self-contained like that, which is a rarity in the Last Revelation. The 4 stones are hidden behind specific tile combinations. Going in blind by just pushing random tiles is a very bad idea though. Doing so might punish the player with a horrifying maze full of blades, which serves absolutely no purpose other than to waste your time and health, and it doesn't even have a single fucking pickup for your trouble. Instead, Lara must use her binoculars to look up the secret combinations to the places she actually needs to go. Some of the stones are hidden behind very difficult challenges, like the insanely difficult underwater maze that feels like it's straight out of Tomb Raider 3's at times bullshit challenge design. Other stones are hidden behind challenges that barely feel like challenges, which unfortunately makes the level feel a bit uneven. Underneath the Sphinx is a fun level though, even if it's not perfect. Race for the Iris is sort of an extension to the Last Revelation's opening level set in Angkor Wat. Here, a 16-year-old Lara must race her mentor Werner von Croy to the highly mysterious Iris artifact, which almost consistently has appeared in the classic Tomb Raider games. It doesn't matter whether Lara actually beats von Croy to the artifact or not, except for a minor change in the level-ending cutscene, so the stakes aren't very high, which is a shame. What's really unique about this level though is that it completely changes depending on how thoroughly the player explored the previous level for its Golden Skull secret pickups. If the player found less than all of the Golden Skulls in that level, the path to the Iris artifact is really simple and it's almost impossible to not beat von Croy to the artifact. If the player found all of the Golden Skulls, however, the path is much more challenging and it's actually genuinely difficult to win the race. Especially when von Croy shuts gates in your face. So, this level is really lame and pretty cool at the same time, depending entirely on which path to the artifact you've unlocked. This makes it a bit difficult to rank as I need to take both versions into consideration. I think this lukewarm placing is very fitting. I've never been a fan of the first Tomb Raider game's visual portrayal of Atlantis. While I applaud the designers for thinking outside of the box with this interpretation, I also don't really want my Atlantis to look like Belial from the Basket Case movies or Freddy Krueger's skin for a less obscure reference. Its fleshy and bloody presentation is downright horrific and disgusting, which is surprising for a game that on paper is just a fun treasure hunting adventure. This particular presentation makes perfect sense in the game's story, but I honestly would have preferred something more conventional. The unfinished business expansion's Atlantean Stronghold level is similar to the Atlantis level of the main game, but adopts a more sprawled out design as opposed to that level's vertical structure. It's a very long and confusing level, which isn't really a favorite of mine, even though it does have some good moments. The level is packed with frenetic combat encounters against the Atlanteans, however, and combat is generally my least favorite aspect of the classic games, so that's not a good thing. Usually I like these very long and challenging Tomb Raider levels, but this one just kind of goes on forever. The level does, however, have an absolutely amazing ending, which must be the greatest spot for a swan dive in the entire series. Not only does this require precision to pull off perfectly, but Lara will dive past previous areas of the level, which is a nice touch. As soon as 40 Fathoms begins, Lara faces potential death by drowning. Beginning a level with the underwater breath meter rapidly depleting and seemingly nowhere to catch your breath is quite panic-inducing and unfair. Once Lara finds her way inside the Maria Doria shipwreck to catch a well-earned breath, the level thankfully becomes less stressful going forward and more based around exploration and light puzzle solving. In the later levels of the Maria Doria section, the player gets to explore the truly interesting parts of the wreck, but 40 Fathoms exclusively ties the player to exploring the rusty engine areas at the bottom of the ship. Or, well, top of the ship in this case, since the wreck is upside down. Besides the fact that the level designers quite obviously saved the best parts of the shipwreck section for later levels, 40 Fathoms is a pretty good opening level that does a nice job of setting the stage. There's just something exciting about this setting, even in 40 Fathoms. The cistern is like a dear old friend that you initially are happy to see again, but then you find out that you don't really enjoy their company that much. The whole sewer aesthetic of the level with its multiple shades of grey and mossy green is a bit of an acquired taste. The cistern also has tough competition from the grease levels that came before it, and it's simply not as engaging as those were. It's a very confusing level to figure out, and it's easy to get lost as everything looks similar. The main gameplay mechanic of the level is to play around with the water levels of the area, making previously inaccessible areas accessible. Unfortunately, the level has the classic game's perhaps only case of soft locking, which happens if you investigate a certain side room before raising the water level. This is obviously a sin in level design philosophy. The Cistern isn't a great level, but I do have a soft spot for it as it's a level that I liked a lot as a kid. It has a certain presence that I like, especially because of that scary rat-infested ambience. And speaking of rats, the rats in this place are huge, gross, and scary. In conclusion, taking in the atmosphere of the Cistern and imagining what function it used to have for the Romans is more exciting than actually playing it. Diving Area improves on its predecessor by completely eliminating the redundant no weapons part and instead gives us one of the most combat heavy levels of the series. Besides giving us numerous enemies to defeat, the level also tasks us with climbing the world's longest ladder. Twice! I kid you not, this ladder takes an entire minute to climb and it's just as tedious as it sounds. When you are forced to climb it the second time, you just know that level designer is a piece of shit. Overall, the setting feels more dynamic than Offshore Rig did, with more varied gameplay and fun locations, and I must admit that it is a pretty fun level. There are a lot of enemies, however, and it does get a bit excessive towards the end. Like I pointed out earlier, combat is typically my least favorite aspect of the classic Tomb Raider games, but it's quite fun here. Some of these bastards even have flamethrowers, which can be a pain in the ass to dodge due to their long range. The ending of the level does a nice job of setting the stage for the Tibet section of the game later on, as a very lucky Tibetan monk gets to witness Lara change into her first new outfit of the series. Following the massive and confusing Atlantean stronghold level, the Hive is more straightforward and enjoyable to play through, even though that too suffers from featuring the Atlantis setting. It does not cut back on the combat, however, but the encounters are much more engaging this time around. Some of them are downright epic, such as a battle against a centaur at the top of a set of stairs, which has a cool cinematic feel to it. My personal highlight of the level is an ominously lit chamber towards the end, which has numerous dormant Atlanteans just waiting. You just know that these creatures will come to life, so this calm before the storm should be spent preparing a strategy because it's obviously not going to be easy. Picking off these creatures one by one is very satisfactory, but it's also extremely difficult and stressful. Not only does Lara need to constantly move and jump around to avoid damage, but she must also continually be fed medipacks to be kept alive. The Hive ends the unfinished business expansion in a fine way, even if these Atlantean levels aren't nearly as good as the Egyptian ones that came before them, but more on those later. Cleopatra's Palaces is a very visually appealing level that feels refreshing to explore as it stands in stark contrast to the dusty old ruins of the preceding levels. Unlike all of those areas, Cleopatra's Palaces look pristine and they are adorned with lush vegetation everywhere, as well as a beautiful fountain and pool in the main hall. The palace is armed to the teeth with spike traps, however, which makes it impossible for Lara to go anywhere without being impaled. Lara must build a mechanical wind-up beetle which she can use to trigger the spikes so she can advance safely. Near the end of the level, Lara needs to have a statue of herself created to weigh down a pressure towel so she can leave the palace. The problem is that if the statue takes damage from any of the flying Ureas that begin to swarm the room, Lara takes damage as well. This makes the ascent out of the room pretty challenging, as Lara simultaneously needs to defend the statue and make progress towards the exit. Before Lara can grab the final pieces of Horus armor, she must survive an intense battle against the two guardians protecting it. Cleopatra's Palaces is a fun level that I appreciate not only for its refreshing visual presentation, but for its unique gameplay challenges as well. Ice Palace has big shoes to fill as the closing chapter of Tomb Raider 2's Great Tibet section, and it doesn't quite. It just doesn't stand out much, even though it is an unusually sizable level for a boss level. The level introduces jump pads, which, while fun, seems somewhat misplaced in a Tomb Raider game. They play an essential role in the first area of the level before the level transitions towards a more grounded style. My personal highlight here is one of the level's secrets, in which a leap of faith reveals an invisible bridge that takes Lara straight to the level's gold dragon figurine secret. There's also a cool moment later on where Lara travels through an area from the previous level, which is followed by an interaction with a fire pod you couldn't reach in that level. Ice Palace begins to pick up for me once Lara closes in on the actual palace and traces of civilization begin to disappear. As expected, there are numerous enemies and environmental dangers for her to survive here, such as yetis and an avalanche. The Ice Palace itself is a rare example of the classic Tomb Raider graphics actually working against it, as the palace isn't as visually impressive as the place its name takes your imagination to. On top of that, the sole resident of this palace is Garuda, and he looks more like a stocky little birdman than some mythical creature we are supposed to be afraid of. Ice Palace has enough good moments to not be a failure, but it still leaves me rather cold. The South Pacific section of Tomb Raider 3 is one of the series' most difficult stretches of combat, platforming, puzzle solving, you name it. Temple of Puna ends this section by cramming it all inside a really short level full of difficult trials with next to no breathing room in between. Besides having to dodge venomous darts from Polynesian tribesmen in the opening area, the rolling blades from Tomb Raider 2 return. Lara must press 4 buttons and avoid being sliced by these blades at the same time. This is followed by a super stressful trap in which Lara must pull 3 switches in rapid succession in order to open a door so she can escape before being crushed by a lowering spike ceiling. It would have been nice all these years had I known that I just could have pulled a block out of the wall to stop the ceiling instead, but I did not know that. There's still another trial in the gauntlet for Lara to pass, or should I say, crash?
What have I got?
The level ends in a showdown with the final boss of the South Pacific section. He uses a meteorite artifact to attack Lara with electric jolts that will instantly kill her, while also summoning reptiles with severe cases of lethalitosis. Oh, and there's also a bottomless pit beneath the arena, because of course there is. Temple of Puna is not an easy time, but it is a fun time. I encourage all players to try and complete it without failing any of the trials, as it feels super rewarding to do so. Caves is the level that started it all, the first Tomb Raider experience for millions of people, the one that set the stage for an iconic franchise, and it is quite forgettable. It's by no means a bad level, and it completely succeeds as a first level in terms of easing the player into the game's controls and gameplay. There's just not a whole lot to see and do here, which won't do it many favors in a ranking of levels like this. The level does have a few standout moments, like the room with the bridges and the wolves, and the secret area with an Aztec calendar in Peru. There's also a hidden encounter with a giant bear, which can be avoided by successfully jumping over the pit it lives in. I suspect most first-time players failed this jump though, and suffered their first ever death at the hands of this bear. Visually, I like how lush vegetation sporadically grows in the caves, which stands in stark contrast to the cold setting overall. This vegetation basically functions as early foreshadowing of what's to come 2 levels later. Besides that though, this level is as generic as they come. I mean, it has bats. Ultimately, Caves is just there, and that's fine because the series had to start somewhere. City is a very short but fun level that features a very different and unique boss encounter. Miss Sophia Lee is not just deceptively old, she is wonderfully evil too, and a perfect adversary for Lara. After leaving her office, this level is nothing but a race to the top of London's skyscrapers between Sophia and Lara. Sophia shoots deadly rays from a meteorite artifact, so the player needs to constantly be on the move. This race is actually quite exhilarating, but there's a nice reward for the player at the end of it. Due to the influence of the artifact, Sophia is immortal to gunfire, but thankfully not to electricity. Lara must lure Sophia onto a certain platform and then shoot a circuit box which will shock her. This wonderful gotcha moment might be the series' most satisfying boss kill. City is very short, so it's hard for me to justify it ranking higher than this, but it has a lot of personality for such a short level. Reunion is the final level of the Lost Artifact, so in true Tomb Raider fashion it brings Lara face to face with the final boss. This time the boss is a very familiar face and someone Lara has killed before. Miss Sophia Lee is back and she's more evil than ever with the Hand of Rathmore in her scepter. In the levels leading up to this reunion with Sophia, Lara has been witnessing her gruesome experiments on humans and animals, so it's even more motivating to kill her this time. Sophia is so evil that she's worthy of being killed twice. While the boss fight itself isn't as fun as it was back in London, the rest of the level is far superior. It has an incredible nightmarish presentation with lighting and colors that makes you think of Dario Argento's Suspiria. The entire level takes place in a twisted version of the previous level, as if the Hand of Rathmore has opened a portal to hell or something. These walls are decorated with bones, warped faces and human flesh. Once Sophia is dead, for good this time, a hot air balloon arrives to pick up Lara, which is a fun way to say a final goodbye to Tomb Raider 3. Did Winston grow a beard? This is a tough one to rank. The River Ganges is mainly centered around driving a quad bike along the banks of the Ganges River. So far, so good. At one point, the road forks, however, and whether you go left or right completely changes what type of experience this is going to be for you. The left path is much shorter and consistently tied to using the quad bike, while the right path is more traditional exploration and platforming based gameplay. This freedom of choice is nice and a hallmark of the level design of Tomb Raider 3, however, in what I consider to be bad level design, you'll miss a secret if you pick the right path. Which I guess makes it the wrong path. If you want all secrets, you have to pick the left path, and that contradicts the non-linear playstyle Tomb Raider 3 promotes. This sucks even more since the left path easily is the worst path from a gameplay standpoint. The quad bike is just not fun to drive here because the level design doesn't accommodate it. You are always put in situations where you need to carefully navigate the vehicle around tight corners and ledges, which just isn't fun. Driving a quad bike is supposed to be fun. So, while the right path is pretty good and would probably merit a ranking about 5 places higher on this list, the left path is not and would merit a ranking about 5 places lower, I guess. So, overall, it's a mixed bag. The oddly titled Fool's Gold has Lara exploring an abandoned Soviet facility, which by the looks of it could have been a gulag once upon a time. Since it's an expansion level, it has a completely unique visual presentation. It almost feels like a Wolfenstein 3D level in a Tomb Raider game, just with Soviet imagery instead of Nazi imagery. It's a quite combat-heavy level, but I don't mind it so much this time around since the encounters usually take place in big open areas. There's a good amount of variety in the enemies as well, such as flamethrower enemies and machine-gunning snowmobiles joining the usual cast of thugs. Fool's Gold is an above-average level that really kicks into high gear towards the end, however. A glowing skeleton at the entrance of a giant cave indicates that perhaps the Soviets were about to uncover something mysterious in this place. Descending into this cave and discovering the ancient murals marks the moment the Golden Mask expansion goes from average to fantastic. Shakespeare Cliff doesn't quite measure up to the level of greatness of the other levels from the Lost Artifact, but it's still very good. It takes place in the Channel Tunnel between the UK and France, and this sort of setting just doesn't really lend itself to the same level of imagination as the settings of those other levels. In general, industrial settings in Tomb Raider tend to be a bit hit and miss for me. The opening area with the cliffs of Dover in the background does a nice job of setting the stage though. If there's something the Lost Artifact expansion never fails in, however, it's in its secrets, and Shakespeare Cliff is no exception. Most of the level is set within a giant crater created by the Hand of Rathmore artifact. It's at the bottom of this crater the level hides my favorite secret of all time. Lara must dump seawater into the crater to be able to swim to a strange pocket dimension deep within the underground. Dinosaurs are no strangers to the Tomb Raider games, but uncovering this dimension and finding pterodactyls left me awestruck when I first did so. Battling the pterodactyls within this volcanic setting is a personal highlight for me whenever I play the Lost Artifact. With the best ever Tomb Raider secret to its name, I guess Shakespeare Cliff is alright in my book. Tomb of Tehogan is the direct continuation of the sister, not just in terms of chronological level order, but also in terms of aesthetics. It's a far more linear and straightforward experience, however, which is very welcome after the confusing mess that is the cistern. The level designer has really nailed the atmosphere of exploring something long forgotten, as Lara's deep below the folly she entered levels earlier. Tomb of Tehogan introduces the series' first otherworldly creature for Lara to fight against, as an Atlantean centaur comes to life from its statue form. This marks a turning point in the series from which Tomb Raider opens its doors to the supernatural for the first time. The best thing about Tomb of Tehogan, however, is that Lara finally gets to kill that asshole Pierre Dupont. He's a rival Tomb Raider who's been ambushing Lara with gunfire throughout the entire Greece section, and I hate that bastard. He's been shooting, running and hiding all this time, but this time, he dies. A truly satisfactory ending to a rock-solid level and the fantastic section set in Greece overall. Caves of Kalia is a dark maze with a few boulder traps, some more fair than others. Finding your way through this double-tiered maze is no easy task, especially since some corridors are hidden behind pushable blocks. Eventually, Lara will make it to a mysterious dark pit in the middle of the floor. After weighing in your options, you'll come to the conclusion that the only thing you can really do here is drop into this pit. You'll then realize that you've jumped into a pit full of cobras in every single direction, and it's the most terrifying thing ever. So your instinct is to get the fuck out of there as quickly as possible, but that will trigger a boulder, so you need to look out for that on top of dodging cobras. Thanks, game! I cannot stress enough how terrified this section made me as a kid. The level ends with an epic showdown against the mad scientist Tony. He's not the most resilient boss in the series, but his offense is incredibly dangerous since it will only take one hit from his unpredictable fireballs to kill Lara. Caves of Kalia is short and sweet with an exciting finale. It's packed with great little moments, proving that even the shorter levels can leave a great impression. Okay, so far so good. I'm halfway through this ranking, so I've now ranked my bottom 60 levels of the classic Tomb Raider games. That of course means there are still 60 levels to go, and all 5 games still have levels in the running. The first Tomb Raider game and its expansion still have 15 levels to go. Tomb Raider 2 and its expansion also still have 15 levels to go. Tomb Raider 3 and its expansion still have 17 levels in the running. The Last Revelation has 11 levels left, including the Times exclusive. And finally, Tomb Raider Chronicles has 4 levels left. These levels don't rank themselves, so I better continue. Coastal Ruins is a unique Tomb Raider level since it works as a sort of hub area from which other levels can be accessed. From Coastal Ruins, you can either head into the catacombs, which will lead to levels like the Temple of Poseidon and the Lost Library, or you can head for Pharaoh's Temple of Isis, which eventually will lead to Cleopatra's palaces. It's even possible to open gates and create handy shortcuts back to Coastal Ruins from some of these levels. You can also always head back to Genevieve in the Alexandria level for a hint if you're stuck. I just really like the whole Coastal Ruins area and find it a very beautiful and peaceful location. Well, except for this little place called Egyptian Adventure. An abandoned theme park that apparently was designed to kill its visitors. Every attraction in this place, except for the broken down mechanical snake charmer, is a death trap. Fun times for the entire family. No, actually, this place really is fun to explore. In one room, Lara must retrieve a crossbow from the floor, but she must observe the large mirror on the end wall at all times to know exactly where she can step without being impaled by hidden spike traps. This crossbow is crucial to pass the shooting gallery in a different room of the theme park. This shooting gallery is timed and there's a pit of spikes beneath it, so it's a quite stressful challenge, but hey, nobody said anything about explosive ammo being against the rules, did they? Clearing the shooting gallery rewards Lara with a coin, which she can use on the mechanical snake charmer. Then she can climb his rope up to the attic, where she can build a hooked stick, which she can use to grab the catacombs keys from the ticket booth. Egyptian Adventure is easily one of the most bizarre locations in the classic Tomb Raider games, as you just gotta wonder why this place even exists. I think I'm a little in love with it though. Floating Islands is the perhaps most unique looking Tomb Raider level of all time. What the hell is this place supposed to be? There is no explanation how Lara got here, so it's almost as if we are playing a dream that she's having, or a nightmare in this case. The level is supposedly inspired by the myth of Mount Panglai from Chinese mythology, as well as the quartzite sandstone pillars of Wulin Yan, which resemble floating islands when engulfed by fog. I suppose the idea here is that when Marco Bartoli stabbed himself with the dagger of Xi'an, he opened a portal to the realm of the dragon spirit. While plenty of Tomb Raider levels deal with supernatural elements, Floating Islands is unique for taking place within an otherworldly setting. The level has a completely unique look and a terrifying atmosphere with its nightmarish ambience, but I'm not entirely on board with it. I prefer levels that are grounded in reality, since abstract locations like this are kind of difficult to relate to. It's also a very difficult level, and not in a good way. There are so many combat encounters against the Guardians of the Dragon's Lair, and they are incredibly overpowered. It takes Lara forever to kill these bullet sponges, yet they can instantly kill her. That's not fair. The combat encounters near the end of the level are particularly cruel, which solidifies Floating Islands as one of the most difficult Tomb Raider levels of all time. I'm all for a difficult Tomb Raider level because of its platforming or puzzles, but combat? Not so much. Temple of Karnak opens with a showcase of Lara's hilariously reckless driving, which is just so unnecessarily dangerous. Couldn't she just have parked the Jeep nice and safely instead of slamming it so hard into the temple, potentially damaging that, the Jeep, and herself? Anyways, this level is the first of 3 interconnected medium-sized levels set at the famous ruins of Karnak. These levels sort of work as one big level, which unfortunately makes each of them feel a bit underwhelming on their own, as they don't work as well as levels individually. They basically don't feel like full levels, but separate parts of one level, which obviously won't help them in a ranking of individual levels like this. Temple of Karnak is the opening level of this section, and while it has some of the most beautiful locations, it also feels the least interesting from a gameplay standpoint. Lara's walk on water is my personal highlight here in a level that by no means is bad, but perhaps a bit too transitional for its own good. The Great Hyperstyle Hall feels really underwhelming during Lara's first visit, as it's really just a transitional area between 2 bigger levels. The second time she goes there is a much different story and easily the highlight of the level. During the first visit, a cutscene shows Van Croy and his goons arrive at the temple, which foreshadows some of the epic battles that dominate the second part of the level. Shooting down monkey-swinging goons never stops being funny, just saying. The Great Hyperstyle Hall is incredibly beautiful and more colorful than the rest of these Karnak levels, and for this it really stands out positively. Sacred Lake is the final part of the interconnected levels set at Karnak, and overall my favorite, as it works a little better than the other 2 as a self-contained level with more standout moments. The highlight here is an underwater puzzle involving a mirror, where only the mirror's reflection can reveal the secret way out. I also really like exploring the surrounding areas of the lake itself, which are full of crocodiles. And besides crocodiles, this area is also home to some of the most tirelessly persistent scorpions I've ever seen. They'll follow Lara to the end of the world to put their stinger in her.
Get over here! Get over here! Get over here! Get over here! Get over here!
Aw, Aldwych, I want to love you, but you make it so damn difficult for me. Before I get into that, let me talk about the things I do love about it. Aldwych is based on an abandoned tube station in London, which adds some authenticity to the level. Exploring this place is genuinely creepy, and while Aldwych only closed 4 years before the events of Tomb Raider 3 in the real world, it feels like humanity abandoned it much earlier. This place is now infested with a nail-bat-wielding gang of undead thugs called the Damned. Also, since we are in an underground train station, there's a new danger for Lara to watch out for. This level has a feeling of danger that feels much more realistic than the usual dangers Lara has to deal with. The atmosphere of Aldwych is incredibly well made and definitely the best thing about it. Another highlight of mine is to find the Freemasons' temple deep within the underground tunnels. This temple is still being attended by someone, judging by the lit torches, which is creepy. Unfortunately, I always find Aldwych a bit of a chore to play through. It's a huge level that's rather confusing to navigate, so lots of getting lost and tiring backtracking is to be endured repeatedly. A lot of areas in the level look almost identical, which makes sense due to the theme of the level, but this adds to the frustration of trying to make sense of it. There are also some truly, well, puzzling puzzles in this level, like using a coin that only works in one specific ticket booth. Aldwych gets some things very right, and I can certainly appreciate it. It's a very challenging level, which in theory is a good thing, but when most of the challenge lies in making sense of the level's confusing structure, it's mostly a recipe for frustration. But again, it's not entirely bad. The submarine is a classic type of no-weapons level, where Lara has been taken prisoner and therefore has no guns, which pretty much was a tradition at this point in the series. Being held as a prisoner in a Russian submarine deep beneath the sea is not a good situation for Lara to be in, obviously, but it's the perfect stage for a level like this to unfold. Navigating the numerous ventilation shafts and eavesdropping the villain's evil plans all add to the great atmosphere of this level. Again, I think Lara gets her pistols back a bit too early in the level, but it's not quite as bad as it was in Offshore Rig, as I feel the part without the guns leaves a bigger impression. The level becomes more of a generic Tomb Raider level from that point onwards, but the sound design is anything but generic. It does a phenomenal job of convincing you that you indeed are exploring a submarine deep beneath the sea, which is equal parts intriguing and frightening. As a classic no-weapons level, the submarine is certainly better than its Tomb Raider 2 counterpart, but it can't quite hang with the best of those levels, which I'll get to a little later. The Last Revelation never got an expansion like the first 3 games did. Instead, it got this exclusive The Times level to commemorate the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. It kind of speaks volumes about Lara's popularity back in the late 90s that a media corporation like The Times would cross over with her and release a unique level for its readers to play. It's a surprisingly good level too, which seems oddly familiar considering that it's a level designed uniquely for this occasion. Well, that's because we've all visited the areas of this level numerous times before in the Last Revelation's main menu demo of all things. I love how they made a level out of these beautiful locations because I remember being really confused and disappointed as a kid about not seeing them in the main game. It's a very straightforward level and there's not much to it in terms of a challenge, but it works perfectly as a sort of virtual guide of ancient Egyptian locations. Which I'm sure was exactly what the level designer was going for, considering the nature of this project. The city of Vilcabamba has long been abandoned by humans and is now the home of wolves, bats, and bears. Unlike the barren caves, you can't avoid fighting one here as it guards a room you need to enter, which perfectly sums up how this level works. While caves held your hand, City of Vilcabamba demands more from the player with more dangerous combat encounters and complicated platforming. The level is a fair and gradual step up in difficulty though, which is good. Where Caves was very linear and basically getting Lara from point A to B, City of Vilcabamba is more open and the design of the level encourages the player to explore the various surroundings. Several parts of the city aren't even required to visit in order to progress, which makes the level interesting to go back and replay. While this level too is tied to a cave setting, the textures and general level design is more advanced here. The Incan artwork is gorgeous and really helps paint the mood of the level. City of Vilcabamba does come across as more of a transitional area than a main focus of Lara's though. It feels more like a setup to the next levels of the Peru section than a main event in itself. This hurts the level a little bit, but City of Vilcabamba works well in between the game's opening level and the far more noteworthy third level. Apparently Jigsaw from the Saw franchise used to work as a level designer for core design because Burial Chambers seems like something straight out of his sick mind. I mean, every damn inch of this place is armed to the teeth with spikes, giant rotating blades, spikes, small rotating blades, and did I mention spikes? It's a fun level that really keeps you on your toes where you need to watch every step you take. At one point in the level, Lara must make her way through a large rotating chamber which is completely unique to this level. Rotating the chamber will give Lara access to different side rooms and corridors, which eventually will make it possible for her to reach the exit. Burial Chambers is also the setting of the most important moment in the game, where Lara accidentally releases Set from his tomb. The first sign that Lara has done something she probably shouldn't have is the numerous mummies that rise from the dead to attack her. Some of these mummy encounters are set in claustrophobic tight spaces and are downright anxiety-inducing since the mummies can't be killed. A shotgun blast can momentarily incapacitate them, but the only real solution against them is to take advantage of how slow they are and plan your escape. The final challenge of the level tasks the player with keeping Lara alive in a small room with a mummy long enough for it to fill with sand so the exit above can be reached. Which is a tense moment to say the least. Sorry, I was just enjoying the music there. Venice and its iconic canals are excellently adapted into a level in Tomb Raider 2 as the atmosphere and visual presentation of the city is spot on. Well, it is an unusually desolate take on Venice without hordes of tourists. Instead, it has the series' first ever non-boss human enemies parading around the streets with baseball bats and firearms. I guess these Via Manera cultists could explain why the tourists have vanished and the residents stay behind closed doors. Venice is also the first level in the series to introduce vehicular gameplay, as most of the exploration of the level takes place in a motorboat. Annoyingly, Lara can't defend herself while driving it, which means that she'll take lots of unavoidable damage from gunfire. This gets frustrating very quickly, and there's potential to abuse a lot of medipacks because of this. To complete the level, Lara first needs to sacrifice her motorboat to clear the canal leading to the exit of water mines. She must then reach the exit in a different boat, but only has very limited time to do so after pulling a switch. This race to the finish is an incredibly satisfactory ending to a level that ultimately is very good despite some vehicle-related awkwardness. Bartoli's hideout takes Lara away from the public canals of Venice and into the secret compound of the Via Manera's deranged leader, Marco Bartoli, which of course is well guarded. While the level's predecessor mainly tied exploration to the motorboat, this level is more of a traditional Tomb Raider experience, which means we get to explore Venice on foot instead, which I prefer. Bartoli's hideout gives us several interesting locations to explore, like Venetian back alleys with lemon trees, a library, and the dark flooded basements beneath the compound. Bartoli's cult leader paranoia shows itself in the level design, as this place is packed with traps. My favorite part of the level, and one of my favorite parts of Tomb Raider 2 overall, is the chandelier puzzle, where Lara must raise and lower a set of chandeliers to reach different parts of a giant ballroom. Bartoli himself has fled to an abandoned opera house nearby, which the Via Manera uses as a warehouse. This opera house is blocked by a building, so Lara obviously needs to take an entirely different route to get there. Or not, as she just blows up that building instead for a bit of that classic Lara Croft subtlety. A lot of negative things can be said about the second half of The Last Revelation, and I've certainly done my part in that, but I can't deny that the final level of the game is excellent. Since it's the final level, a confrontation with Set was to be expected, but the level has much more to it than just that. Long before that confrontation, the player is tasked with my favorite puzzle of the entire series, where Lara must use water to put a number of scales in their correct positions, which is surprisingly difficult yet stimulating. The confrontation with Set is suitably epic, and I find it rather refreshing that he must not be dealt with in a traditional boss fight. I mean, he's a god, so how could Lara possibly defeat him? Instead, he must be re-imprisoned, which must be done by climbing all the way back out of the cave while dodging his deadly attacks along the way. This escape is exhilarating and does a really good job of making the player feel like they need to move constantly. It's kind of like the showdown against Sophia Lee in Tomb Raider 3, but on steroids. In my opinion, Temple of Horrors is a near-perfect final level. Thames Wharf has a cold, dark and wet feel to it that is very effectful. The ambience perfectly establishes a London atmosphere as Lara sneaks around the rooftops of the city in her catsuit unbeknownst to the busy city down below. Thames Wharf does not hold your hand or give you any sort of direction with its non-linear level design and intimidating verticality in the opening area. There's a lot of tricky platforming here and several enemy encounters. Eventually, Lara will make it to some sort of sewer facility from where the level takes on a more puzzle-heavy direction. Essentially, Lara needs to play around with the water levels of the giant tanks to take her to different parts of the area. This can actually be quite confusing, and in a way the level comes across as a modern take on the cistern, including the giant rats. There's an enjoyable puzzle in the underground where you need to trick some sort of robotic thing into short-circuiting itself. The level gets really interesting towards the end when Lara emerges at the top of the very cathedral you could see at the opposite side of the Thames at the beginning of the level. The awesome level-ending cutscene puts Lara on the track to take down Miss Sophia Lee. Thames Wharf is a really good level, largely because of its incredibly well-designed atmosphere, and it sets the stage very nicely for the London section's next levels. Wreck of the Maria Doria is not my favorite level of the shipwreck section of Tomb Raider 2, but it definitely feels like its main event. The entire level is upside down, which makes exploration very interesting. This is very well executed, as it's just bizarre to explore an entire level that's designed like this. There is also an unsettling atmosphere of sadness in the level. It's a chilling experience to witness areas like the giant ballroom in its current state while imagining what it used to look like before the Maria Doria met its tragic fate. It's a brilliantly different take on a tomb, showing us that tombs don't necessarily need to be located in thousand-year-old temples or crypts in places like Egypt or Greece. The Maria Doria became the tomb for hundreds of passengers back when it sank decades earlier. The level is non-linear, with lots of backtracking, which can get a bit frustrating. There's something about its numerous corridors and similar looking areas that makes the level really difficult to map out and navigate, which can add to this frustration. Lara must swim through narrow cave corridors full of moray eels and barracudas to finish the level, which is terrifying. This is another one of those wonderful Tomb Raider moments where I just kind of prefer to close my eyes and hope for the best. It's a Madhouse is an aptly titled crazy level in the Lost Artifact. It could have been named Lara at the Zoo because in this level a French zoo has been Tomb Raiderized into one big death trap with spikes and all that good stuff. Aesthetically, there's nothing like it, and I really enjoy exploring the various parts of the zoo and the surrounding town. There are lots of parallels to draw to Nightmare in Vegas here, as they both are somewhat goofy and over-the-top levels, but here the madness works. This is one of the most entertaining Tomb Raider levels to explore, as it's so unusual to see Lara in this type of environment. During the day, this zoo bids hundreds of guests welcome, but during the night, the animals, including tigers, are just allowed to run freely around, it seems. The level designer has found several unique ways to adapt typical zoo areas like an aviary and a monkey terrarium into areas for challenging platforming. One cheeky little monkey will grab a key that Lara needs to get out of there, and there's just no way it will give her the key no matter how much she points her guns at it. There's really only one conclusion to come to here. Who would have ever thought that a zoo could work as a Tomb Raider level, but it does, and it's a classic example of that quirky out-of-the-box level design of the Tomb Raider expansions. Tomb of Qualopec is the first actual tomb in the series, and while it's a rather short level, it's a great one. I love how the camera positions itself behind the Scion once Lara makes her way towards the locked gate to the tomb. This is a great way of telling the player that this is their goal and now they need to figure out how to reach it. The level has a striking visual identity that really sets it apart from the previous levels with its use of bright and clean colors. The pristine condition of the tomb stands in stark contrast to the city of Vilcabamba and makes the place feel completely hidden and isolated. This level is actually quite important since Lara is doing her first actual tomb raiding in the series here by stealing the first Scion piece. The piece is ominously being watched by the skeleton of its long-deceased Atlantean owner as Lara enters the tomb. Grabbing the piece causes the tomb to collapse, so Lara must quickly escape in order to survive. The level ends with a very brief boss fight against Jacqueline Natla's hired gun Larson, who's there to steal the Scion from Lara. He's no match for her, of course, as he's a pretty dumb guy.
KO!
Lara's home is the charming tutorial levels of the first 3 games, which I've decided to merge into one for the purpose of this ranking. The first iteration is really basic and serves solely as a place where the player can get acquainted with the game's basic mechanics like vaulting, jumping and swimming. Tomb Raider 2's version adds an outdoor training facility where the player can hone their more advanced platforming skills. It also introduced actual puzzles for the player to solve in Lara's home. Lara has a massive hedge maze in her garden, which will lead to a button that opens a timed door to the secret treasure vault. It's hilarious to see all the familiar items from the first game, which she apparently pillaged and put in her basement. More importantly, Tomb Raider 2's version introduces Lara's butler Winston to the series. This old geezer persistently follows Lara all over the place to serve her tea, but he should know better. I bet there's not a single 90s kid out there who played Tomb Raider 2 and didn't lock Winston inside the walk-in freezer in Lara's kitchen. We all did it, we are all horrible, horrible people, and we all did it to him again in Tomb Raider 3. Tomb Raider 3's version of Lara's home is unsurprisingly the peak version of it, taking the best of the previous versions on top of looking absolutely gorgeous. Lara's treasure vault has been moved to a different location and features artifacts from the previous games now, as well as a T-Rex mantle. An even more elaborate puzzle must be solved to get inside the timed door room this time, which has been changed into a large aquarium. Lara must take a swim in the fish tank in order to grab the key to the secret quad bike track. This is actually the best place in the game to drive the vehicle, where the player can practice and improve their time on the track. It's also possible to do some target practicing on poor old Winston. How the hell did he get out of the freezer though? Well, there's only one thing to do about that. Home Sweet Home is a natural follow-up to Lara's home in this ranking, as this level 2 takes place in her manor. As Lara admires the dagger of Xi'an before going to bed, the remnants of the Via Manera pull up to invade her home. This home invasion is really scary, as Lara's home is enormous and the enemies can attack Lara from anywhere in the dark. Exploring Croft Manor at night is actually quite unsettling. At least there's an opportunity to check in on Winston in the freezer here, you know, just to see how he's doing. Combat is all there is to this level in terms of gameplay, but it works so perfectly for a level with a premise like this. I adore this level so much, and it's such a fantastic way to end Tomb Raider 2. I really like how Croft Manor has been drawn into the main story here for once, as opposed to just being the setting for the tutorial. Once Lara has rid her home of numerous thugs, dogs, and even a double shotgun-wielding boss, she returns to her bathroom to disrobe and take a well-earned shower and...
Don't you think you've seen enough?
An abandoned opera house is such a unique setting for a Tomb Raider level because it takes Lara to a ruined version of something that had a function in modern times. Unlike all the pyramids and temples of the first game, an opera house is relatable, which makes the experience feel more haunting and sad somehow. The opera house is not just dangerous because of the numerous Via Manera cultists that operate from it, but also because of how badly deteriorated it is, which makes the opera house itself a hazard. Lara needs to watch out for collapsing floors, broken glass, sandbags dropping from the ceiling, and even swinging boxes, which, I don't know, that's a bit too cartoonish for me. Lara must figure out how to raise the backdrop on the stage so she can access the cult's secret warehouse behind it. Backstage, she's greeted by more thugs as well as the level's boss. A double shotgun-wielding tall thug who deals a lot of damage. Opera House is a really good level, mainly because of its brilliant setting. The level designer has done an excellent job of making a Tomb Raider level out of this setting, which I can't imagine was an easy task. The gloomy appearance of the level can get a bit tiresome, however, and it's a level that you kind of need to be in the mood for to really enjoy. A level set on a sinking submarine is the sort of cinematic premise I live for. The level takes place in the same rooms and corridors as the submarine level just before pretty much, but the big difference now of course is that water is leaking in everywhere and that the submarine is rapidly deteriorating. New hazards like electrified water and fires completely turn this level upside down, and it must now be approached much more carefully. Rather ironically, this version of the submarine level is very beautiful, as I love how it's bathed in the red lights from the emergency alarms now. In a nice twist to the narrative, Admiral Yarofev has a change of heart and abandons his villainous ways to help Lara escape the sinking submarine. The submarine is still full of Russian mobsters who didn't get that memo though. Or maybe they just haven't realized that the submarine is sinking and that trying to kill Lara should be secondary to trying to get the fuck out of there. The Russia levels got off to a bad start, but sinking submarine is a great closer. Colosseum is not the most advanced Tomb Raider level in terms of gameplay, as it's mainly centered around pulling switches and lots of backtracking. What this level does right, however, is atmosphere. When Lara arrives at the auditorium overlooking the entire arena, I'm covered in goosebumps. This Colosseum was left abandoned thousands of years ago, and it is still inhabited by all sorts of wild animals whose ancestors fought against gladiators back then. It has been completely taken over by these animals, as there are no traces of humans having been here for centuries. Well, except for that stalking no-good piece of shit Pierre Dupont. The animals are also my biggest problem with the level. Animals like gorillas and lions are on the brink of extinction in real life, and I don't really enjoy gunning down hordes of their polygon counterparts here. I know that's silly, but I just cringe at killing dozens of these poor, cute, blocky animals. I'm perfectly okay with shooting Pierre though. Again, fuck him! Besides that though, this is a very enjoyable level. Don't let the immediate beauty of Antarctica fool you, this level does not play around. The icy blue waters look so refreshing, but they are not safe for Lara. She will freeze to death if she stays in them for too long. Lara's goal is to get her hands on the dinghy at the front of the RX Explorer, which will take her further into the landscape to locate Dr. Willard's research facility. The facility is scattered throughout a very large area, which is very confusing to explore and map out because of how open and non-linear it is. Antarctica is obviously influenced by John Carpenter's The Thing, and it really encapsulates that atmosphere of isolation, paranoia, and terror. The level is ominously silent, with the squalls of the polar winds substituting any sort of background music. Lara is repeatedly jumped by treacherous RX Tech researchers and dogs, which adds to the tension of the level. The sprawling design of the level works as a danger in itself, as it's very disorienting and attacks can come from anywhere. A disturbing discovery in a burned out part of the facility, however, kind of solidifies that maybe Dr. Willard isn't to be trusted at all. Lara finds a venom-spewing mutated scientist here, which is a shocking and disturbing sight. This level is the Antarctica section's saving grace for me, because despite being a bit confusing and backtracking heavy, this is a very good level. The Tomb of Set feels like the real opening level of the Last Revelation, whereas the two Cambodia levels more feel like a mandatory Lara's home of sorts. The cave at the beginning of the level is a personal highlight for me due to its absolute beauty and atmospheric lighting. It works as an excellent showcase of the game's upgraded graphics, so I can see why it was featured so prominently right here at the beginning of the game's current day story. For the first time ever, besides Winston in Las Vegas, Lara has a companion who handily moves from one wall-mounted torch to another, illuminating the cave. He'll even take care of scorpions and traps for Lara, but he won't stick around. Lara will take care of that coward at a later point in the game. The Tomb of Set does a brilliant job of introducing a bunch of the Last Revelation's new features, such as the ability to combine key items and search wall crevices. The Egyptian setting also feels like a warm blanket and a very welcome return to Lara's roots, following the increasingly outrageous settings of the previous two games. What Streets of Rome and Trajan's Markets lack in imagination and excitement, the Colosseum level certainly makes up for in Tomb Raider Chronicles Rome section. This level is a great little sleeper hit and closes that section on a high note. It's the one level in Chronicles that actually feels like an old school Tomb Raider level, which I could easily see being part of the first game. I mean, it even has the same name as a level from the first game. In the dungeons beneath the Colosseum in Rome, yes, the famous one, Lara comes face to face with gladiators and lions who somehow have been surviving down here for millennia. At the end of the level, Lara even goes toe-to-toe with a giant gladiator statue that comes to life, who serves as the final boss of the section. The best thing about the Colosseum is to explore the creepy dungeons beneath it, but the level throws in a couple of tense challenges too, such as a crumbling bridge above lava and a timed run to a key item. My only real complaint has nothing to do with what the level is, but rather what the level isn't. I wish it was much longer, plain and simple. This level barely has 10 minutes of playtime, and I honestly think it could have been at least twice as long. The level finishes just as it begins to build some real momentum, which is a shame. The original Tomb Raider game throws everything at the player in its final level. The Great Pyramid is pretty much designed like a final exam, where the player must use everything they've learned in the past 14 levels to complete it, and the game. But first, the player is thrown headfirst into a claustrophobic boss battle against the giant mutant Torso, which there's no time to prepare for, so have fun. Once Torso is dead, Lara must destroy the Scion to foil Jacqueline Natla's evil plans, but that causes the pyramid to self-destruct. This begins an exhilarating gauntlet of traps to escape the crumbling pyramid. Running the gauntlet without ever stopping, taking damage or screwing anything up is an adrenaline rush unlike anything else in the game. The level culminates in another boss fight, this time against Natla herself. Unlike Torso, which was very dangerous, don't get me wrong, Natla is very aggressive and unpredictable. The Great Pyramid is a prime example of how a final level should be designed, with its exhausting gameplay in between the two bosses that serve as the level's main attractions. City of Khamun makes a great first impression, as it's the player's first exposure to the stunning Egypt levels of the first game. Ironically, this is also its greatest detriment, as the later levels of this particular section blow it out of the water. This is always a conclusion I come to in hindsight, however, since I totally immerse and enjoy myself in City of Khamun while I'm actually playing it. The level has very good platforming sections and puzzles and is excellently paced. There are also brand new enemies for Lara to take on here, such as panthers and the absolutely horrifying mummies with their nightmare-inducing screams. Also, you kind of expect living mummies to be slow, zombie-like creatures as well, but these mummies are as fast and agile as big cats. Something that's pretty much exclusive to this level is the fact that it's the only level in the series where not just one, but two later levels in the game return to or reuse some of its areas. It's easy to see why though, as it has some very well designed and memorable locations. In conclusion, City of Khamun is a great introduction to the Egypt levels, but it's overshadowed by the levels that follow. Lara returns to the City of Khamun in the expansion to the first game, where she has some unfinished business, which is a pretty unique premise. Since the last time she explored this city, it has been flooded by some vandal, however. Who could have done something like that to this wonderful place? Return to Egypt is rather uneventful at first, as Lara is seemingly just back in an area she has already fully explored in the main game, but the level picks up and does its own unique thing. It has that trademark expansion level weirdness to it, as this level is themed around cats of all things. There are cat statues all over the place, and the walls are decorated with feline-themed murals as well. There are even giant paw prints in the sand, which Lara must follow to advance in the level. This of course means that she eventually will face the owner of those paws. Cats are fun, and so is this level. What a brilliant theme for a Tomb Raider level, and it gets even better in the next one. Return to Egypt also sets itself apart from City of Khamun by having a beautiful starlit night sky. Since the first Tomb Raider game didn't have any sky textures at all, this really makes the level stand out from its spiritual predecessor. Catacombs of the Talion is, for the most part, a great Tomb Raider level that showcases some beautiful areas and memorable moments. It serves almost as a companion piece to Ice Palace, with the two levels intertwining several times. This level is much better though. The temple and the surrounding caves are very pretty, but there's an unsettling atmosphere as well due to an encounter with a scary Yeti at the beginning of the level. For the remainder of your time here, you just know there will be more Yetis, and this makes the level very tense to play through. In one of the scariest moments of the entire series, you can hear angry Yetis all around you within the pitch-black darkness of the temple. This is frightening because you can't see the place properly, and you feel like you might get attacked by a violent Yeti at any moment. You are safe until you pull a switch, but at that point you better prepare yourself for a fight with a lot of them. Thankfully, the level also has less anxiety-inducing moments, like discovering a big underground lake, which I think is a very nice location to explore. Unfortunately, Lara also needs to kill dozens of snow leopards in this level. Christ, snow leopards are so critically endangered in real life that the amount Lara kills here pretty much equals the amount that's left in the wild. It's a relief when you finally get to kill humans again instead. And that probably got me on a list somewhere. The Lost Artifact expansion takes a dark turn in Sleeping with the Fishes, which is a rather disturbing level. It's unique in the sense that it takes place almost entirely underwater. This means that exploration, puzzle solving, and even combat takes place in water, with a few exceptions. And it's really engaging. There's an incredible secret to uncover in one of the massive underwater caves where the wreck of a World War II submarine has been entombed. Lara is searching for the Hand of Rathmore artifact in the Strait of Dover, where she's uncovered some secret facility that's operating from the depths. This facility is run by good old Miss Sophia Lee, and seemingly her company tries to merge fish and humans. I'm not entirely sure what's going on down there, other than it's some fucked up experiment that's powered by the artifact. The horrifying sight of encaged humans that have begun growing fish scales on their naked bodies serve as very disturbing imagery. Meanwhile, giant mutant monster fish roam the waters outside the facility, begging the question, are these creatures mutated humans created in Sophia's lab? In between the submarine wreck and these human experiments, there's an unsettling sadness and thematic darkness to this level that's quite unlike anything else in this series. After all this horrific scary stuff, it's quite touching how the level ends with a heartwarming little moment where Lara helps a dolphin escape the facility. It's nice when Lara can have interactions with animals that don't end in murder. By Tomb Raider Chronicles, core design was famously fed up with creating Tomb Raider games, but Escape with the Iris shows that there still was a lot of heart and creativity left for the series. Whenever I play this level, I'm amazed at how varied the challenges are and how creatively they've been designed. This level is so well made that I struggled to select just a few clips to show for this mini review, as there's so many cool moments. Which is why I made that line, so I was able to show a bit more from it. And that one. Just to name a few highlights, there's a moment where Lara must trick a security guard to shoot a fish tank in order to disarm deadly floor lasers. There's also a challenge where Lara must outrun a sniper to safety, seen from the sniper's point of view. Then there's the moment where Lara must open the correct box without being blown up by watching through an X-ray screen. And besides those, there's a bunch of exciting platforming through elevator shafts where Lara's new pole swinging ability really can be put to good use. Tomb Raider Chronicles is not a fantastic game in my book, but I honestly feel that Escape with the Iris is a little masterpiece. The living quarters is the peak of the Maria Doria section if you ask me. Lara is seemingly back in the rusty engine areas of the ship, but this soon changes to a much more engaging setting. I really like exploring the engine as well, however, as the piston puzzle is sort of similar to the chandelier puzzle of Bartoli's hideout, which I obviously like. But no, the highlight here is the titular living quarters, which are like exploring a haunted house at the bottom of the sea. The dilapidated old theater of the Maria Doria is particularly spooky and sad. This used to be a place of joy. The walls are decorated with old portraits, candle holders and whatnot, so you almost expect ghosts of deceased passengers to roam the crooked hallways. There are no ghosts here, but plenty of Yamanera cultists who amazingly have made it this deep into the wreck. This is a big problem I have with the Maria Doria levels, as having so many human enemies around really takes away from the feeling of isolation. While the living quarters certainly are creepy, they're not the reason why this level is scary. Why the fuck is there a gigantic moray eel hiding behind the corner in a dark underwater cave? Did Courtesan not realize that kids played these games? I was one of them. Why? Why?
No.
By the Last Revelation, the classic marathon epics of the first 3 games seem to be a thing of the past. The Lost Library is the exception, however, as this seemingly never-ending level puts Lara through a series of not only difficult challenges and puzzles, but does so within an anthill-like maze of corridors and doors. Lots of doors. This is a very good level, and I'll tell you why shortly, but I kind of hate how I always get lost in this massive level. I guess that's why they named it the Lost Library. Still, this level is really good and very satisfactory to gradually map out, make sense of, and eventually complete. The level is very intimidating at first due to how open it is, but you just need to start somewhere and see where it takes you. This ancient library is full of surprises and memorable moments, such as the duels against the Mechanical Axeman and later on the Mechanical Axeman on the Mechanical Horse. Then there are all of the level's brain-breaking puzzles, where my favorite is the one involving the planets. In order to understand this puzzle, you need to keep in mind that this library was built hundreds of years before Copernicus ever discovered that the Earth isn't the center of the universe. The Lost Library feels like a level that's the last of its kind, as Chronicles would follow the template of shorter levels the Last Revelation established. While that's a little sad, at least we got this level, and thankfully it's very good. The charming catmosphere of Return to Egypt bulks up on steroids in Temple of the Cat, as this level goes all in on the cat theme. It's a far more challenging level too, so this basically feels like the delicious main course where Return to Egypt was just a tasty appetizer. This is one of those infamous marathon-like Tomb Raider levels that go on forever. Thankfully, Temple of the Cat is a blast to explore, and it never becomes stale, as it always manages to mix things up at the right moment. It has the usual stunning Egyptian textures you've come to expect from this setting at this point, as well as some new ones. Including these bizarre running cats, which hilariously made me do an actual double take when I played through it. Oh, and for a short while, the level is the Temple of the Crocodile. Gameplay-wise, it doesn't do anything new, but the first Tomb Raider game didn't really have any levels as massive as this, so in that sense it's very different from the main game. A gigantic cat sphinx serves as the final and most memorable location of the level. Perhaps this sphinx was going a bit overboard with the whole cat worshipping this place is doing. I mean, you don't want to inflate a cat's ego more than necessary. To complete the level, Lara must extend the cat's tongue so she can drop into its mouth and reach the exit. That's just perfect level design. I'm not kidding. Okay, I need to stop meow. Tomb of Semirked is a fascinating level that's mainly centered around a game of Senet. This ancient Egyptian board game is sort of similar to both Backgammon and Ludo and essentially tasks Lara with moving her 3 pieces across the finish line before her opponent does. Her opponent is a big creepy face, by the way. The pieces have different colors and are moved by having Lara step on the correspondingly colored floor tile. Lara and Semirked can eliminate each other's pieces, however, which makes this game surprisingly intense. In true Tomb Raider 3 level design fashion, this level will change drastically whether Lara wins or loses the game of Senet. A victory will give her an easy path to the exit of the level, while a defeat will punish her with a much longer and more complicated path to the exit. Annoyingly, some of the level's secrets are tied to the losing path, which I think is bad level design. This doesn't hurt my estimation of the level too much, however, as it has enough good stuff to stand out for a bunch of positive reasons. Like outrunning and surviving the terrifying flesh-eating beetle swarms, which is one hell of an opening to the level. Tomb of Semirked is stunning, with a bunch of memorable locations and good challenges, and is overall a great Tomb Raider adventure. Barkang Monastery is a stunning level with an almost meticulous attention to detail in its beautiful aesthetics. From a gameplay standpoint, the level is very complex and there are so many ways you can take it on. The task you have at hand is to collect 5 prayer wheels, and these wheels are scattered all over the entire monastery, which is enormous. While not only being difficult to navigate, the monastery is, as per Tomb Raider tradition, of course filled with lots of traps to always keep you on your toes. Unfortunately, the level has a design flaw that keeps it from true greatness. As soon as Lara arrives at the monastery at the beginning of the level, she witnesses the Bakang monks fighting with the Fiamma Nera cultists. While the monks generally do pretty well for themselves, you may risk that they'll be killed by the cultists, which you don't want to happen. So, you want to help them, right? Well, unfortunately, this is where Tomb Raider's auto-targeting becomes a big problem, as there's no distinction between enemies and allies. It's pretty much impossible to avoid firing at the Bakang monks if you want to help them take out the cultists, which of course you do. This means that you very likely will end up in a situation where the monks start attacking you because you've accidentally fired your bullets at them. Or maybe these monks just don't like Lara. I mean, they might have a problem with the amount of dead animals that seem to pile up wherever she goes. I can't imagine that sits well with these Buddhist monks. Or maybe these monks have just been living in isolation for a bit too long. Tibetan Foothills starts out deceptively slow, as Lara has a mostly peaceful little hike in the foothills of the Himalayas. She must cross a beautiful canyon through caves and narrow mountain paths to reach the other side. The level does a 180 here and becomes one of the craziest and most action-packed levels of the series once Lara gets her hands on the infamous snowmobile. Honestly, that's a great twist. Tibetan Foothills is the perfect Tomb Raider vehicle level, as it clearly was designed with the snowmobile in mind. Even the puzzles and platforming of the level require the vehicle. The snowmobile doesn't control perfectly, but that adds to the craziness of the level in a good way. The keyword here is fun. Tibetan Foothills is an absolute blast to play through and easily one of the best of its kind. And that snowmobile theme is just such a killer. I don't care what anybody says about old school Tomb Raider graphics, the opening of Coastal Village is breathtaking. As Lara emerges on the beach, she is met by palm trees, waterfalls, colorful streams of fish, and a beautiful sunrise. That's where the tranquility ends, however, as the island of Kuru is scary and dangerous. The player must choose between 2 very different paths that both will take Lara to the titular village. The forest path is rather straightforward, but requires of Lara to gather 3 serpent stones, which are scattered around the area. Delivering the serpent stones will unlock the upper path to the village. The other path is the cave path, and that cannot be accessed before Lara has picked up a key from the coral reefs, which Lara must use to open a trapdoor inside a hut. Lara will then have to navigate a rather difficult platforming section through a cave, which will take her to the lower path to the village. No matter which path the player chooses, Lara will find her way to a very inhospitable village full of cannibals. The village induces a real sense of paranoia due to the constant ambushes from out of nowhere, and it works incredibly well as a tense contrast to the level's tropical setting. Coastal Village is a great example of how non-linear level design can work perfectly by giving the player 2 choices of exploration that are equally exciting in a setting that's very engaging. The only real downside here is that the village itself isn't as interesting as the journey to get there was. Atlantis is one long endurance test that serves as the penultimate level of the first Tomb Raider game. Lara must reach and destroy the Scion at the top of the pyramid, but she begins the level way down in the dungeons. This level has a simple structure that is executed perfectly, where Lara consistently returns to the pyramid's core after she has passed one of the level's dangerous trials. Every time Lara returns to this core, the player can see how much closer they've come to the platform at the top of the pyramid since the last time. This is a brilliant way of using the level's vertical design as progress tracking as well as suspense building. All of the level's trials are satisfying to complete, and they all take on different gameplay mechanics. While some of them are based in platforming or combat challenges, my favorite trials are the ones based in puzzle solving. Atlantis presents the game's arguably most advanced puzzles. The unforgettable doppelganger puzzle is the highlight of the level for me. Lara's doppelganger, or Bacon Lara, must be eliminated before Lara can advance, but shooting it won't work. You see, the doppelganger mirrors everything Lara does in a room that itself is mirrored, so Lara needs to outsmart it instead. The 2 sides of the room are not entirely identical, since one side has a pit that the other side doesn't. Lara must trick the doppelganger to fall into this pit by standing on the corresponding floor tile on the side of the room that doesn't have it. This is a brilliant puzzle in an equally brilliant level. The only thing I don't like about Atlantis is its visual presentation, but everything else about it is sheer perfection. Crash Site is crazy. After crossing a devious swamp with the help of a map, Lara enters the inner jungles of Kuru, which at first seem calm, but they are not. Here she finds a wrecked military plane and its survivors defending themselves against the raptors. This is Tomb Raider 3's dinosaur level, and sadly the last one in the series, but oh boy does it make up for it. Besides raptors and the cutest tiny little flesh-eating dinosaurs, there's the easily most difficult T-Rex encounter of all the classic games. Crash Site is exhausting to play through, and I love it. The combat encounters are plentiful, but exciting and challenging in a good way. At one point, Lara needs to pull a lever in a piranha pool, which needless to say isn't going to end well for her. Instead, she needs to divert the piranha's attention to a raptor carcass that's hanging from the canopy, which she must drop into the pool so she can pull the lever without being eaten alive. This is easily one of my favorite puzzles in the entire series. And just when you think you've seen everything this level has to offer, it kicks into an even higher gear. Locating 2 keys gives Lara access to a cannon with which she can blow up the remaining raptors, as well as the temple in the mountains for good measure. I think it's safe to say that we are officially masterpiece territory now. Highland Fling is a great opening level for Tomb Raider 3's Lost Artifact expansion that really sets the bar high. Lara is infiltrating Dr. Willard's private castle to search for a lost meteorite artifact he has in his private collection. Dr. Willard's castle has a mysterious and engaging atmosphere with lots of brand new beautiful textures. Scotland is, hands down, one of the most strikingly beautiful locations Lara has ever explored. Highland Fling isn't anything special in terms of gameplay and is seemingly designed to just let the player explore the surroundings at their own pace. And exploration is exactly what this level excels at. The myth of the Loch Ness Monster is charmingly built into the level with a couple of possible Nessie sightings if the player pays attention. These sightings function as more than Easter eggs, however, as they sort of build up to the level's incredible secret. You see, if the player manages to locate the secret area, Lara will eventually stand face to face with a fire-breathing Nessie. However, it's not the real Nessie. It's just some weird mechanical Nessie-inspired submarine thing Dr. Willard owns, possibly to scare away artifact thieves. This secret is absolutely fabulous, what a great idea, and what a fun way for the level designer to play into the discourse of the legitimacy of the Loch Ness Monster. All of this Nessie stuff is completely optional, which tells you something about the great lengths this level goes to reward exploration. Highland Fling is an awesome level that I'm sad is hidden away in an elusive expansion that's not readily available for all to play. Where Highland Fling was a rather easygoing exploration-based level, Willard's Lair is an exhilarating gauntlet of death traps from start to finish, pretty much. A lot of these traps are very unpredictable, and so the level lends itself to a trial-and-error way of progression. That typically isn't a good thing in my opinion, but the level's unpredictability is also a big part of its charm. The sudden deaths don't feel as infuriating as they feel like cheeky little gotchas the level throws at you. There's a devious maze of boulders early in the level that I doubt anyone has ever survived first try. When Lara finally reaches the safe that contains the Lost Hand of Rathmore artifact, she discovers that it has been stolen, and from this point on, all we do for the rest of the expansion is following its trail of toxic goo. In true The Lost Artifact fashion, the level peaks for me in its brilliant final secret, where Lara has an epic showdown against mysterious time-traveling Highlanders. These Highlanders lurk in a hidden meadow within the castle, which is a stunning location for such an epic battle. What can I say, this level is awesome! St. Francis Folly is based on the monasteries of Meteora and serves as the opening level of the Greece section in the first game. It's the first level in the series to have a main area from which Lara must gather different items in off-branching side rooms. Due to centuries of deterioration, it has become very difficult to navigate this main area, and it now has an almost dreamlike surreal presence to it. Lara's objective here is to collect 4 keys in 4 different trial rooms that are based on heroes and gods of Greek mythology. What? Never heard of Thor, the Greek god of thunder? Thor's trial room is primarily based around Thor's hammer Mjolnir, which Lara must trigger and dodge to gain access to the key. Damocles' mythological sword is the inspiration for the numerous swords that hang from the ceiling in his trial room. They'll drop and kill Lara instantly if she doesn't tread carefully on her way back from grabbing the key. Atlas' trial room is a game of chicken with a boulder, which I suppose is supposed to represent the celestial sphere that Atlas carries on his back. And someone at Courtesign obviously needs to do their homework on Greek mythology, since Poseidon is mistakenly called Neptune here, his name in Roman mythology. His trial, of course, is a swimming puzzle, and probably the most underwhelming of the 4 trials. The player can take on these 4 trials in whichever order they like, which is really cool. It's also worth noting that besides all that, this level has some of the undoubtedly hardest secrets in the entire series, which requires some actual skill to collect. This is an incredible level all around. Obelisk of Khamun is hands down the most beautiful level of the first Tomb Raider game. There's simply an abundance of pretty textures throughout the entire level, which makes me really want to completely immerse myself in it and take my time. The architecture of the level is fascinating as well. It feels almost like an ever-changing Rubik's Cube that keeps reinventing itself just as you begin to feel comfortable with it. I mean that almost literally, as a switch in one particular giant room can alter the very structure of it. Lara's objective in this level is to extend 4 bridges to a giant obelisk where she must pick up 4 unique key items that must be used back in the city of Khamun. Making sense of this massive level while gathering these key items is truly stimulating, especially in these beautiful surroundings. Lara's return to the obelisk in the city of Khamun is a great ending to this wonderful level where placing the 4 key items unlocks the exit. The way the city and the obelisk of Khamun are interconnected works really well, and ironically it works better here than it did 3 years later in the Last Revelation, which expanded on this concept. Back when I experienced the Last Revelation's Desert Railroad level for the first time, it was like witnessing magic. I couldn't believe how a Tomb Raider level on a moving train could even be possible. Since then, there have been other iconic video game levels set on trains, but Desert Railroad has a very special place in my heart. It's the most cinematic level of the classic games, but it totally makes it work and does so through gameplay as opposed to intrusive cutscenes. To this day, I still find myself completely immersed in this level and impressed with how groundbreaking this truly was for its time. The level tells a surprisingly simple but great story. Lara needs to go all the way to the back of the train to get a crowbar so she can go back to the front of it and unhook all the carriages carrying Van Croy's goons. In terms of gameplay, it's perhaps a more basic experience than a lot of the other iconic levels I feature here near the top of my ranking. Desert Railroad almost exclusively consists of combat gameplay, but this level is not really about the specifics of the gameplay anyways. It's about the spectacle. Desert Railroad may just be smoke and mirrors, but damn it, I'm aboard for every second of this train ride through the desert. The belief that industrial settings don't work in Tomb Raider is completely obliterated by Tomb Raider 3's fantastic Area 51 level. The level builds upon the stealth gameplay that was introduced in the previous level, as being spotted by guards will make further progression more difficult unless Lara manages to kill them before they can activate the security systems. There's an exciting sense of infiltrating a very dangerous place in this level, with all sorts of advanced traps like lasers and turrets having replaced the usual spike and boulder hazards. Lara has done multiple morally questionable actions on her many adventures, but I think her worst offense takes place here in Area 51. Lara justifies launching a missile simply to gain access to a certain platform. The missile might wipe out some metropolitan area, but damn it, she needs to reach that platform because reasons. Once again, a Tomb Raider level masterfully incorporates a myth into its level design as Lara finds a UFO levitating in the hangar. In a nearby room, a deceased grey alien has been autopsied, adding another entirely different perspective to the whole tomb aspect of the series. The artifact Lara is looking for powers the UFO, so she needs to go inside it to retrieve it. The UFO uses the series' only dimensional transcendental level design, which is pretty cool. Nevada is unusual in the sense that there's no final boss in this section, and I kind of wish Lara would have squared off against someone or something within the UFO. Still, it's hard to complain about anything when the level is as great as Area 51 is. Sanctuary of the Scion is peak Tomb Raider Egypt if you ask me. While the level doesn't have the beauty of Obelisk of Khamun, it more than makes up for it by featuring an iconic Tomb Raider landmark. Inside a massive cave, which must be one of the largest areas in the series, there's a gigantic sphinx. This sphinx is as intimidating as it is awe-inspiring. Since the level takes place almost entirely within this cave, the sphinx is always there in the background watching Lara as she jumps and climbs around the rocks. This is one of the most platforming heavy levels in all the games, but it has some intense combat encounters as well. Some of the platforming is downright vertigo-inducing due to the altitude of the rocks and sphinx Lara climbs. If you are afraid of heights, the level's only secret will push you to the limit since it's way high up in the air on an invisible platform. Which of course means that there's no ground beneath you. There's another gigantic cave beneath the sphinx, which is where Lara must go to advance in the level. Eventually this will take her back to where the level started on the other side of a locked gate, meaning that Lara's final destination was there at the beginning all along. This makes the level come full circle very nicely, especially since another showdown against that idiot Larson awaits. He should have taken that kick to the face the last time around as a warning, because this time his defeat will be permanent. Sanctuary of the Scion is perfect level design. Absolute perfection. Lutz Gate might be the most divisive Tomb Raider level of all time. The level has achieved infamy because of a brutally difficult dark underwater maze that left gamers on PlayStation in particular ripping out their hairs in frustration. I don't really think I need to explain why an underwater maze is frustrating, but PlayStation players had the added handicap of being unable to save their game freely nor adjust the game's brightness. This makes the underwater maze of Lots Gate the perhaps most difficult Tomb Raider challenge ever, and even for the more privileged PC players the maze is really hard, so I understand why Lots Gate isn't universally loved. But personally, I adore Lots Gate. Exploring the remnants of old London beneath modern London is as exciting as it sounds. The level also tells a great narrative as Lara joins forces with the undead sewer gang The Damned to kill Miss Sophia Lee. I suppose the leader Geordie Bob doesn't know about all the murders Lara just committed against this gang in Aldwych. Bob wants Lara to steal some embalming fluid for his rotting flesh from the nearby museum, and in return he'll help her reach Sophia. This is a completely optional side quest, but helping Bob is so much more rewarding as it will take Lara to an incredible homage to a certain past Tomb Raider level. The Egyptian exhibition of the museum is an ingenious way for the level designer to bring Tomb Raider's arguably most iconic location into a game that doesn't even feature levels in Egypt. Lots Gate packs an entire section's worth of variety into one level, and it pays off. I don't care how controversial this opinion is, I truly feel that Lots Gate is one of Lara's greatest adventures ever. Up until Furnace of the Gods, Tomb Raider 2's Golden Mask expansion has heavily featured exploration of industrial settings. This level changes that as it takes Lara on one of her greatest adventures into the ancient unknown. Here she explores a forgotten city made of gold at the confluence of rivers of gold. The mysterious residents of this secret city magically come to life, and Lara must help them protect their city against the evil Avalanche organization. There is no other level that looks like Furnace of the Gods, which has a completely unique visual identity. The level has such an impressive presence with its contrasting use of deep blue for the caves and yellow for the golden rivers and city. It's easily one of my favorite levels of all time from a visual standpoint, but it's a great level to play as well. Besides taking Lara through a series of compelling areas, it's also a fair bit challenging. It's a level I had never played until I decided to do this ranking, and I'm flabbergasted that a hidden gem like this had eluded me for so many years. Furnace of the Gods is a top-tier classic Tomb Raider experience that every fan of the classics should play, and it's really worth the trouble to track it down. The Great Wall is one of the best pranks ever pulled on us gamers. It's the opening level of Tomb Raider 2, but does none of what you would expect it to do as an opening level. Where the opening level of the first Tomb Raider game held your hand and eased you into the game, the Great Wall doesn't give a shit about any of that and just throws you straight to the wolves. Or tigers. The player is simply thrown head first into a gauntlet of death traps. Imagine all of the people who became Tomb Raider fans in 1996 basically being given the final level of that game as the opening level here. Or what about all the newcomers to this series who wanted to get into the franchise based on all the hype, and this bullshit was their first introduction to it? I love this level so much, as the gotcha on the unsuspecting player is masterfully cruel but hilarious nonetheless. The cherry on top of this sundae of insanity is not just one, but two T-Rexes hanging out at the bottom of a cave that's entirely optional to explore. The Great Wall is almost like a highlight reel of the first game, which is the perfect way to open a sequel. Following this, Tomb Raider 2 becomes more moderately paced and evolves into its own unique thing. The Great Wall is a perfect distillation of what Tomb Raider is all about, however, and shows that something doesn't just have to end with a bang, it can begin with one too. Palace Midas is one of the most iconic Tomb Raider levels of all time. It's not perfect, but it's very close. I think the amount of enemies the level throws at you gets a bit too much, but it's the only real downside to a level that's just, pardon the pun, golden. Palace Midas has an ingenious design where Lara returns to previously explored areas from different vantage points, revealing the complex architecture of the palace. The level is a more refined version of St. Francis Folly, with Lara completing challenging quests to collect lead bars instead of keys. At first it isn't clear to the player what the purpose of these lead bars are, but if you're well versed in Greek mythology, the title of the level is a great hint. King Midas, of course, was an ancient Greek king who supposedly had the ability to turn whatever he touched into gold. At one point in the level, Lara comes across a giant hand that has broken off the statue of the king. She needs the touch of the hand to turn the lead bars into gold so she can escape the palace. The level designer has done an amazing job here of converting an ancient myth into gameplay, but what happens if Lara touches the hand? Nevada Desert is a study in atmosphere and pacing. The level starts out somewhere in the desert near Area 51, and Lara needs to figure out how she can reach the infamous military base and locate a mysterious meteorite artifact. The ambience of the desert works perfectly in setting the mood, but the occasional appearances of stealth aircrafts tells the player that they shouldn't take this peace and quiet for granted. The player is tasked with traversing a giant canyon before reaching a detonator that's hooked up to a large TNT box in a cave, so there's the player's objective. So Lara needs to look for a key to the detonator so she can return and blow up the cave to get on her way. This takes Lara to some sort of facility that's being run by a gang of bikers. Lara needs their quad bike to jump the fence that's meant to keep intruders away from Area 51. This facility is protected by an electrical fence, however, so Lara needs to find some other way inside. Nevada Desert is one of my favorite levels, not just because of its brilliant atmosphere and immersive narrative, but because it offers some of the series' most exciting exploration. While the level doesn't take Lara to your typical awe-inspiring ancient temple or anything like that, it still manages to transfer the same level of mystery and immersion to this modern-day setting. Also, the level's ending is perhaps the most Lara Croft thing ever. Don't let the fantastic music, captivating atmosphere, or the fact that jungle is the opening level fool you into thinking you are safe, because in Tomb Raider 3, you are never safe. I wonder how many first-time players died on that mod slide at the very beginning of the level. Welcome to Tomb Raider 3. This creepy jungle has multiple ways to kill Lara, and so the level does a great job of preparing the player for Tomb Raider 3's unpredictable and unforgiving style of gameplay. Jungle's level design is quite clever since the exit of the level can be seen in the distance at the beginning, but requires a big detour through the jungle to actually reach. If Lara tries to cross that swamp to the exit, even that will kill her. The only thing that won't kill her in this jungle are the monkeys, but they will run away with medipacks and even keys if the player doesn't act quickly. Jungle is my go-to level if I need a quick Tomb Raider fix, since it's masterfully balanced in all aspects of gameplay. With its non-linear level design and difficult challenges, it really embodies that infamous Tomb Raider 3 experience and serves as a perfect opening level. Natla's Mines is the first ever no weapons level, and it's fantastic. Lara has been left for dead by Jacqueline Natla and her goons and has tailed them to Atlantis, but all of her hard-earned Skion pieces and weapons have been stolen by them. Since Lara can't defend herself, the player must be really careful when collecting the fuses required to gain access to her pistol, since Natla's cowboy henchman is patrolling the area. When Lara does get her 2 pistols back, it's time to take on the 3 henchmen who serve as sub-bosses of the level. First up is that damn cowboy who Lara was defenseless against before. Once he's down, Lara gets her magnums back. Up next is the skateboard kid who randomly has his very own skater park down here in the dungeons of Atlantis. I guess that was a demand he made to Natla before signing his henchman contract. He's very fast and can be quite difficult to hit. Once he's down, Lara gets her Uzis back. Finally, there's the big bad Baldy who guards the entrance to the Great Atlantis Pyramid. Once he's down, Lara gets her shotgun back. This is a very simple yet perfect narrative that the level tells through nothing but gameplay. Natla's Mines perfectly facilitates this revenge story. It's also the most hideous level of the first Tomb Raider game though, especially coming right after the attractive Egypt levels, but that makes total sense since Lara has hit rock bottom here. Lara's journey back to the top is what makes Natla's Mines shine. High Security Compound is Tomb Raider 3's version of a no weapons level, and it's not just the best version of it, but a perfect version of it as well. Lara has once again been taken prisoner, and so she can't protect herself against the abusive prison guards. Instead, she must release other prisoners from their cells to do her dirty work. It's hard to believe that Lara couldn't kick these guards' asses herself, but it's such a fun mechanic that I'll just play along. For almost the entire level, Lara is defenseless and needs to sneak around the compound without being spotted. If she gets spotted, the only way she can survive is to lure the guard into an ambush of prisoners or by turning the compound's security installments against them. It's fascinating to witness Lara this vulnerable, where her only means of survival is by using her wits instead of her weapons. When Lara finally does get her pistols back at the end of this very long and tense level, she is also gifted a potent Desert Eagle for all her trouble. Finally being able to fight back against the guards with a weapon this powerful is such an iconic moment of empowerment, and it's set to one of the most epic pieces of Tomb Raider 3's soundtrack. I adore this level and how differently it must be played from all other Tomb Raider levels, which is exactly how a level like this should be. Cheers, Lara. For all these years, I had no idea that one of my favorite Tomb Raider levels would appear in an expansion for Tomb Raider 2 that I had put off playing for decades. It's hard to believe that anything could surpass the Splendid Furnace of the Gods level within this tiny 5-level expansion, but amazingly Kingdom does. This level takes Lara on an incredible adventure. As soon as the level begins, the setting is perplexing, as Lara seemingly has traveled back in time to a period with giant humanoid apes. There is no time traveling involved though. Lara has just found her way to an ancient cloud forest in the mountains, which hides a lost civilization and a temple made of gold. Where the previous level used blue to contrast the golden colors of the city, Kingdom's use of green does an equally great job. When Lara climbs to the top of the cloud forest's canopy with a breathtaking view of the mountains, I'm just floored. This level is so damn beautiful. From a gameplay standpoint, the level is amazing as well, as there's a lot of variety. There's a tricky switch puzzle within a maze of cages, there's some sort of battle arena for combat, and it has the arguably most well-hidden secret of all time. The level can be completed by either killing or trapping the giant bird monster boss in a big pit, which is a unique way to defeat a boss. From Nightmare in Vegas to Kingdom, Tomb Raider 2's Golden Mask expansion certainly has this ranking covered from top to bottom. There's something spooky in that jungle indeed. Temple Ruins is quintessential Tomb Raider. It's a level that uses all of those things you associate with classic Tomb Raider games, such as the setting itself where Lara is exploring an ancient temple ruin hidden within a remote jungle. Then there's the way the level tasks the player with some of the series' most difficult platforming and combat, like the terrifying Shiva statues. The first time you see one, you just have this feeling that it will suddenly come alive. Yet it doesn't. So of course you lower your guard, but then the next one you come across does come alive. The statues are very difficult to defeat as they shield themselves from gunfire with their numerous scimitar-wielding arms. Besides the usual environmental hazards like spikes and boulders, Temple Ruins is also equipped with a couple of timed traps that require pitch-perfect execution to survive. And on top of all that, there's the usual faunal dangers like Indian piranhas, as well as the friendly monkeys from the previous level not being so friendly any longer, for whatever reason. But worst of all, the cobras. I'm terrified of snakes, and while I've learned to react more mature to them with age, the fear of the cobras that I had while playing as a kid still causes a lot of tension when playing through Temple Ruins today. A good kind of tension. Temple Ruins is incredibly immersive, well designed, and fun to play. It's a great level to use as an introduction for newcomers to the classic game, since it's a perfect distillation of those games. They would of course get their asses handed to them over and over again, sure, but that's just how classic Tomb Raider rolls. Lost Valley is Tomb Raider. There's no better way to say it. While the level has a very basic premise of simply collecting 3 cogs to advance to the next level, I said cogs. It's what it does with this premise that's amazing. At this point in the game, the player has seen nothing but cave settings and Lost Valley is seemingly more of the same. That's just until Lara does a certain right turn, and at that moment the entire franchise is made. Just put yourself in the shoes of someone experiencing Tomb Raider for the first time back in 1996 and suddenly finding themselves face to face with raptors and a T-Rex. This essentially taught the player that anything can happen in Tomb Raider. Lara's battle against the dinosaurs is downright epic and serves as such a brilliant twist in the game. I'm confident in calling this Tomb Raider's most iconic moment. Exploring the little nooks and crannies around the valley is great, and it's remarkable how open the level design is for such an early level in the series. Lost Valley is a trailblazer in 3D level design and should be celebrated as such. Even the opening area with the river passing through the cave has lots of little secrets everywhere for the player to explore. Lara must return to this area to put the cogs in place, which then reveals the Tomb of Qualopic's hidden entrance behind the waterfall. I truly believe that Lost Valley is a perfect Tomb Raider level that has everything you could possibly ask for. And despite being one of the shorter levels, it leaves an everlasting impression. Temple of Xi'an opens with one of the cruelest moments in Tomb Raider history as the rug is pulled from under Lara's feet right before she's able to finally grab the dagger of Xi'an. Close, but no cigar. Seeing Lara slide further and further away from the dagger and into the dungeons beneath the temple gives you a feeling of despair, but it's also infuriating, and this motivates you to get all the way back up there and claim that damn dagger. There's a very long journey and a lot of hard work ahead of you, however, and that's putting it mildly. Temple of Xi'an shows absolutely no mercy. It constantly tests your reflexes, timing, and platforming abilities with some of the most advanced trap design of the entire series. Temple of Xi'an is the granddaddy of them all, the level that separates the women from the girls, the men from the boys, and the hardcores from the casuals. And that dark cave with the giant spiders will for sure separate those with courage from those without courage. From start to finish, there's not a single moment where this level goes easy on you, and it's just wonderful. There are very few gaming achievements as satisfying as conquering every single challenge Temple of Xi'an throws at you. The difficulty is incremental throughout the entire adventure, but never unfair. On top of perfect level and challenge design, Temple of Xi'an also perfectly weaves a fantastic revenge plot into its level design. This time Lara must not exact her revenge against a person, but the level itself. Specifically that fucking trapdoor. If I'm being completely objective, Temple of Xi'an might be the best Tomb Raider level of all time. But it's not my favorite. This is it. Marubu Gorge is my all-time favorite Tomb Raider level. It's a controversial choice, I imagine, as Marubu Gorge by no means is a universally loved level. To me, however, it excels in every single way. There are very few gaming experiences that operate on the same level of immersion as Marubu Gorge does for me, and that's why it's my favorite. When Lara explores this gorgeous location, so do I, as this level puts me right inside the level alongside her. Again, Tomb Raider 3 gives the player a non-linear level with numerous paths to explore and lots of dangers. The beautiful scenery and tranquility of the ever-present sound of the rapids is contrasted by the constant potential for instant death if Lara falls into said rapids. It's impossible to get anywhere on foot in this location, so Lara will need some transportation. Essentially, this level is infamous for the kayak. While the kayak is crucial to advance in this inhospitable environment, there's only so much it can do to protect Lara in this gorge of violent rapids and falls. The player needs to utilize whatever little control they have of the kayak to reach the final destination with as much health as possible. Even a sliver of health will be better than death, which is the more likely outcome. The kayak is very sluggish and difficult to control, but that's how it's supposed to be. This way the level perfectly encapsulates the sense of struggle against nature as Lara desperately tries to stay alive. Eventually Lara will get out of the kayak and must climb all the way back along the cave wall next to the river she just went down to pull a giant plug that hides the Temple of Puna beneath. This way the player gets to appreciate the architectural marvel of the level's complex design outside the frustrating confines of the kayak. Finally, the player must pass one of the series' most difficult challenges as Lara must drop safely into the now revealed entrance of the temple. This must be done with the utmost care as Lara will instantly die if the drop is too high or fast. Madubu Gorge is exhausting and transcends regular gameplay immersion with the level of stress it puts on the player. You don't just complete Madubu Gorge, you survive it. And so ends this journey. I truly believe that the original Tomb Raider games are the best video games ever made, and nothing in my recent playthroughs for this ranking did anything to change that. These games are still amazing. This video is my love letter to the series I've loved for so many years now, and I hope it showed. I can't thank the gifted people at Core Design enough for their wonderful contributions to my childhood memories. Finally, thank you so much for watching. Take care.